Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, fans, members, I am Seamus Coughlin, filling in for Tim Pool, who said he had a, quote, tummy ache this morning and didn't want to, quote, come into podcasting today. I'm excited for tonight's show. We have a wonderful guest. We also have a number of very interesting stories here. Trump has announced that he fears he is going to be arrested for his supposed involvement in January 6th. Iowa is in the middle of a legal battle over abortion. An euthanasia activist in the Netherlands has been convicted of sending over 1,600 suicide kits to different people across the country. All that and more tonight. But first, before we get into it, I want to ask you all to smash that like button and become members at Timcast.com. If you do, you will not only be supporting the show and the empire that we're attempting to build here, but you'll also get access to the after show segments where things get a little spicy. We don't have to follow the sort of conventional YouTube or television rules, and it gets a little bit wild. It's kind of a free-for-all. I think you guys will like to check that out after the show. It's usually pretty engaging. I'll also ask all of you to go over to castbrew.com. Pick yourself up a bag of Cast Brew coffee. We're our own sponsor. We are building culture. And you know what? It's never tasted so good. Cast Brew, absolutely delicious. I want all of you to go check that out. Order a bag. Help us out with what we're doing here. Tonight, we are joined by Connor Tomlinson of the Lotus Eaters. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much for inviting me, everyone. Yes, Connor Tomlinson, writer and host over at lotuseaters.com, spearheaded by the wonderful Carl Benjamin, also frequent face on GB News, the English equivalent to Fox, essentially.
You might want to come up on the mic a little bit.
I'll move that closer. There we go.
You can move it around with you too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And yeah, generally just talk a lot of rubbish for a living. So
nice. Hey, well, you're in good company.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're joined by the rest of us.
Yeah.
That's all we do
That's
professionally
all we do.
now.
Yeah, that's all we do professionally and in our spare time.
Yep. It's 24/7 here. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer from Timcast.com. I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight, and I think it'll be a fun show.
I'm Ian Crossland. I did triceps and shoulders today.
Nice.
Hardcore, baby. It balanced out the biceps and I guess something else I did yesterday. I feel great. I feel hot, and I did Stitch and Adams podcast earlier today.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, how was that?
It was awesome. Those
Yeah, they're
guys are
cool.
fantastic.
Yeah, I like
love them. So you can find that at Stitch and Adam on YouTube. Check it out after the show, after the after show, if you're coming to visit us at timcast.com. I'm going to pass it over to Serge Dupria.
Hey guys, what's going on? Some stuff got changed in the settings last night, so if it sounded weird, let me know in the chat. But we'll be good. I'm Serge.com again on Twitter, etc. Follow me, argue with me. Take it away, Seamus.
All right, getting into our first story tonight, Donald Trump fears that he is going to be charged in connection with the January 6th riot at the Capitol. He released a statement on Truth Social where he said he was anticipating that he'd be investigated. We have a quote from him here. Deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with President Joe Biden's DOJ, sent a letter, again it was Sunday night, stating that I am a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation and giving me a very short 4 days to respond to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest and indictment. So that's massive. The former host of this show, Sir Timothy Cast, often has a two-word phrase that he references, especially in reference to the president of the United States having legal pressure on him or a former president being arrested. You all know what that phrase is?
I don't have any drink to hand. So are we allowed
exactly.
to answer that at this point?
Yeah, no. Civil war. That is what he would say. And in honor of him, I must repeat those words because it's what he would have wanted. How do you guys feel about this? And also, as a Brit looking and seeing American culture and society in governmental operations, how does this look to you?
Well, we, as an American vassal state, a relationship which should have never been inverted, but there you go. You know, saying controversial things to the chat already. It's obviously a political indictment. It's obvious that they're trying to just get him off of the ballot in whichever states which would bar him if he were indicted from being off, because they're petrified of him winning a safe and secure election. One of the most egregious ones that we covered on our show was the E. Jean Carroll case, where... And we can't say she was making it up because that would be libelous. But considering she might have gotten her story from a Law and Order episode, this does not look very credulous. Also, the whole documents thing. I mean, yeah, okay, he's probably stored them improperly, judging by the photos that were given to the New York Post. But he does have declassification power. Joe Biden does the same thing. obviously a partisan justice system. And so this is just another attempt in a long line of incredulous claims to try and scare him off. And frankly, as a Brit, I don't think our political establishment would like Donald Trump back in. I mean, the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid wrote a piece for The Times saying that he publicly endorsed Joe Biden while still in government. Things like that, just ridiculous. But Trump's energy policy, for example, fantastic for the UK before we decided to blow all our money on Ukraine and demolish our energy security. And this was one of my former jobs. I used to work in energy policy. And Trump, from 2017 to 2019, made America not only the first energy independent for the first time since Nixon signed the mandate with expanding fracking, getting natural gas, but you guys, despite Donald Trump being a climate denier, he made the US lead the world in reducing their emissions. And so you're achieving environmental goals whilst also making it so that you're insulated from geopolitical conflict.
Yeah.
And of course, the uniparty types that wanted to sell all of your strategic reserves to Sinopec couldn't have that. And so if Trump were back, the UK would be absolutely benefiting, but
yeah,
they're doing their best not to.
I think a lot of us would be benefiting from it. One thing I find fascinating, you mentioned climate change, the fact that Trump is a climate denier. This is one of the most ridiculous phrases that you hear thrown around politically. A person can be totally accepting of every single thing that's even supposedly in the scientific consensus surrounding climate change, but if they're not an alarmist who says the world is going to end in 12 years and then says that again in 12 years when the prophecy doesn't come true, then they're a total climate denier and we have to disregard everything they say. There's a sleight of hand that frequently occurs where they'll say something like 97% of climate scientists agree that humans are having some effect on global temperatures or climate. And they will use that to suggest that 97% of climate scientists say that we have catastrophic climate change that is going to kill us in 10 years if we don't pass the Green New Deal. It's ridiculous. But it's also interesting to get back to the topic after I've pontificated on that, to just consider the way Trump is viewed in Europe. And I'm curious what the view of the average English person is. It doesn't surprise me that your establishment doesn't like him because he's very anti-establishment, but like on the ground, when you're just dealing with everyday average people, what's the general feeling about him? And also, is this kind of thing talked about? The legal scandals here, January 6th, whether it was an insurrection, etc.
They're talked about peripherally. It depends on if a person watches mainstream news or not. If they watch the BBC just because, and I don't wish to disparage my own mother, she's lovely and she supports my career, but if you're turning on the TV and you go on autopilot, you might see the 60-second news bulletin that says President Trump has been indicted again, or the January 6th committee has declared him guilty, or whatever. Lots of people will find his rhetoric bombastic just because of British manners. It's kind of outside of our norm.
But I think like pretty much all rhetoric is bombastic compared to British manners, no?
Well, sort of. Actually, to be fair, I've seen lots of Americans really enjoy our House of Commons debates because we do
They're amazing.
deliberately insult each other at the dispatch box. Though it's still bread and circuses because they both agree on the same policies at all times.
Yeah.
Like if you examine the Conservative and Labour parties, like it's the Michael Malice phrase: conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit.
Amen.
Well, both parties are just flooring it right now. But not to wander off topic. Lots of the British public, I think lots of them like Trump's character just because he's kind of funny and how he sticks it to the establishment, in the same way that they liked Nigel Farage and Brexit. Like Nigel Farage got about 4 million votes the last time he ran and didn't get a seat because of our electoral system. But lots of the British public were so fed up with the capital P progressive unidirectional narrative that Tony Blair in the 1990s said was as inevitable as the changing of the seasons, that they really just wanted to stick it to the establishment. And this is why they voted Boris eventually in 2019. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out very well because he ended up being a progressive as well. But he won a stonking majority because people thought he was a bit like a British Trump, a sort of foul-mouthed guy who was dragged backwards through Eton. He thought he'd be on their side. And so the perception of Trump is basically, if you watch the mainstream news, you're not going to like him because you think he's rude and bombastic and he overthrows democracy. If not, you're going to think of him similar to Brexit, of these people aren't acting in my interests and I will take a stick of dynamite to tear it all asunder, than another sort of polite nodding establishment figure like a Mitt Romney or something.
I think so many Americans feel sort of similarly. They actually like Trump's energy. It is appealing to them. He is a breath of fresh air. That's why these campaigns to get him indicted on literally anything, to have the headline always be Trump charged, Trump investigated, Trump, whatever, to make him look bad is so important, because so much of the public, and I'm sure it's true across the ocean, just read the headline, right? They'll never go into the details of what's being said. They just want to string enough words together to scare you away from inquiring further.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what's toxic about our news cycle. One of the most powerful moments of the campaign this year for me has been Trump on stage at town hall refuting everything that was brought against him with the Eugene Carroll case. And it was hilarious. I mean,
was
he
beautiful.
is a comedian. It's so
That's
funny
right.
and also calm and logical. And it's not, this terrible, ugly speech. It's just like, I own the plaza across the
Yes.
street. Why would any of this have happened?
Well, that's exactly right. And so here's one of the things about Donald Trump that I think is often overlooked, and one of the probably most unfair characterizations you'll see of him. Of course, he's going to be compared to a fascist because they compare everyone they don't like to a fascist. But his speeches are the most anti-fascistic style speeches you're ever going to hear. A fascist leader gets up in front of the people. He's extremely serious. He's extremely strong. It's not time for joking around. It's time for business. Trump just goes up there and he riffs and he's hilarious and everyone has a great time. And part of what was so beautiful about that CNN town hall was the fact that this woman was speaking to him and literally positioning herself as the anti-fun person. This is a CNN town hall. This audience was not selected because they loved Donald Trump, and even they were cracking up and having a great time because of his delivery and his performance. Now, you can sit there and say, I don't want that in a leader. I don't want someone who cracks jokes. I don't want someone who has that kind of charisma. Sure, whatever. That's not what I'm trying to address here. But my point is, the media will play clips of him and then criticize those, and even then they don't end up looking that great. Attempting to criticize him in person, on stage, when the people in the audience are on his side is the worst possible optics, because everyone's having a great time and laughing, and CNN is there going, no, stop having fun. You need to stop having fun right now. And they ended up cutting it early because of that.
Caitlin Collins, is that what you're talking about?
I believe so.
She's an interesting person, and I don't want to ad hominem on that girl too much but I just noticed.
I'm not ad homing her. I'm just saying it was very.
I'm about to, so I'm just saying beforehand I don't want to, but I'm going to. I like her, but I mean I like that what she's doing. I'm glad she's out there, but like her smile, she's got like, I don't know if she got work done on her face, but the sides of her mouth are like up in a smile, but everything about her face shows misery.
Doesn't smile behind the eyes.
Yeah.
There's lots of people like that in media. Yeah. It's a sort of, I don't want to psychoanalyze or step outside my remit. It's a telltale sign of psychopathy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm not going to speak to her condition specifically, but that is something you'll notice. There's
such
an
cases.
eerie, exactly, and that's why it makes sense that there's so many people in the media who have that kind of face. And that is Hillary Clinton's face, right?
Yes.
I mean, she's very much got that phony smile, and this is something about Donald Trump that a lot of people appreciate, and I think even people who don't agree with him policy-wise will usually acknowledge is a good thing. Somebody like Hillary Clinton, right? She's a person who follows every single one of the rules and conventions necessary to create good optics for oneself and be considered a conventional political leader who could be tenable to the American people and the establishment. But behind closed doors and behind the scenes, we all know she's unbearably corrupt. Donald Trump, on the other hand, follows none of the rules, none of the social conventions surrounding the way political leaders are supposed to speak and act in this country. And yet, relative to basically every establishment political leader in this country, and especially Hillary Clinton, he's squeaky clean. This is not something I would have said about him back in 2016, by the way. I wouldn't vouch for the guy at that time. When the Russia stuff first came up, I was unsure if it was true or not. But as they continued to investigate and it continued to become apparent that it was a nothing burger, and they spent years trying to nail him on anything they could with all of these random investigations, and they found nothing, it became obvious that this guy was way cleaner than I ever thought he was to begin with.
If I can just pick up on two things there. The first thing is how he presents himself optically is, I don't want to say it's a tactic, but it's something I've learned is very useful for when you do mainstream television, because it's very different to the sort of relaxed, long-form stuff that you guys do here and we do over at the Lotus Eaters. And that is, most of the time, people just want to monologue in their little section box, and they want to say their piece, and they're not actually addressing you if you're on a debate panel with someone. They're just trying to win the audience over. What Trump does is he breaks the fourth wall. He shows that the emperor has no clothes. He routinely says, okay, this is how they're framing something. This is how they're trying to make me look bad. When I've done that on air before, if someone isn't addressing my point, I'll just say to the audience, just so you guys know, you're not going to answer my question. That's it. Just so everyone can see, you're just going to dodge it and you're going to come up with your pre-scripted talking points. And it shows the disingenuity of the establishment. And that connects to the fact of, and this is why they say certain things are beyond debate, or they say certain things are threats to democracy, or the uniparty agrees on both policies. There's a German legal theorist that I know James Lindsay is not a fan of, as he has had a go at me on Twitter this week, Carl Schmitt. Now, let me declare, I disavow his mid-century German allegiances later on. But before he joined the party that we will not name, he recognized that that things like liberalism and technology are depoliticizing forces. And he defined political as the friend-enemy distinction. There is a group of people that are against your end-stated goals, and there are a group of people that are for it. And even though you might have a common enemy at the time, when the enemy is vanquished, are we rebuilding the same society? And the depoliticizing force, it eliminates, it mires things in debate, and it says certain things are beyond debate, and so it stigmatizes certain perspectives. And actually that smuggles in the existential threat. So that would be like the fall of the Republic. So the wheels are still spinning, the oligarchs are still profiting, and in the background, the forces of entropy are setting on your country and tearing it apart. And that's what I think people felt when they voted for Donald Trump. They felt that the establishment had ring-fenced off certain things, like the global offshoring of manufacturing to leave the country behind, the hollowing out of the social texture of the United States, where we're all just squabbling over equality and forgetting about the capital C creator in the Bill of Rights. And because those things were beyond reproach, it didn't not have human consequences. And they saw this man as a repoliticizing force. They're going to speak to us, his friends, against our enemies. He is pointing out the depoliticizing framing, and he's hammering them on it.
Yeah, I think social media censorship was also a technological, squishing of, civil rights, or at least like who has the right to tell me I can't say what I want on the internet just because it's owned by a private company? Like, no. It's. I agree with you. The technology is way beyond politics, and it can take things like a snowball down a hill. So, for good or evil, I understand or for good or bad, like whether or not it's good that we had someone come in and start saying he's a bad guy, I'm a good guy. Like, it is polarizing, but it's maybe people just craved it subconsciously because we've been in this like bubble of like allowing these corporations to kind of take control.
Yeah. Well, no, I think there's some truth in that. And also say, I think the primary reason why people want this friend-enemy distinction is because in reality, you do have friends and you do have enemies, yes. And there is such a thing as good and evil. And for a very long time, what evil has done is attempted to blur the lines between the two so that it could ultimately redefine them. There's no such thing as good. There's no such thing as bad. It's all one thing. And then once people are confused enough, they start to tell you that the good things are bad and the bad things are good. And speaking of that, abortion is once again legal in Iowa. Just 2 days after an abortion ban at 6 weeks was signed into law. A judge has just struck down these restrictions, and I really should call them protections because they're protections of the unborn, and abortion is now legal up to 20 weeks in Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa's a really interesting case because you're seeing this live battle play out. I mean, when Governor Kim Reynolds went to sign this new legislation, which successfully passed the Republican-held House after a special session, there was a judge saying, I am actively in the middle of a challenge on this, and it would be flippant of me to rule on this without giving it consideration. So that law went into effect on Friday, and he came out early this week and said, actually, we can't go forward with this. We're going to revert back to our 20-week ban on abortion. The legislation in question is a 6-week ban. There are certain exceptions for rape, incest, fetal viability if it's in question, or if they couldn't survive outside the womb, and mother's health. What I find interesting is you're seeing Iowa itself split apart. And of course, for us, Iowa's significant because it's an early primary state. What happens in Iowa, especially during election cycle, is often viewed as a magnifying glass on the rest of the country.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. There's going to be a massive clash there. I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. Once again, as somebody coming over here from England, what are the laws and social conventions like surrounding abortion? One thing you hear all the time from American progressives is that we are just this backwards, far-right, theocratic nation relative to the enlightened Europeans who just let anything that the progressives want happen. But especially prior to Roe, if you actually looked at abortion laws in Europe, you would find that many of them were actually more strict than the laws that you would have, especially in blue states in the U.S.
I am sorry to rain on your parade a little bit. That's not the case in how it plays out in England. So, the English case is legally it's 24 weeks, despite other than if you can have a health example that can justify it going further. And
can I just interject to ask one question?
Yes.
When you say health example, so in the United States, like for example, there are certain blue states where like up until the point of birth, which is why I'm saying that that's so much harsher than what you have in Europe. But what I want to ask you about with this legal exception for the case of the life of the mother, one thing that happens in the U.S. is they will use things like depression or a poor mental health outcome to justify that. Is it the same?
It's exactly the same in England. Yeah,
Oh, boy.
we have far fewer abortions in the United States as a proportion of population as well, but it still does happen. And abortion in the UK is unfortunately one of those things that's just declared beyond reproach. I was once called anti-English because I was against abortion because it's just been settled law for how long?
Anti-English, huh?
Yeah,
To
I
not
know.
want English babies aborted.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, radical position, I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah.
One of the disturbing things that's happened, and this has happened both because of the rising prominence in the polls of the Labour Party after their stinking defeat in 2019. They're now getting a bit more bold because they know they're probably going to win the next election anyway. And after the UN AIDS principles, which I don't know if you guys know about.
No.
Okay, I'll explain that in a minute because it's a really dark rabbit hole. But we recently had a debate in Parliament among the MPs, this isn't tabled legislation yet, but about a right to an abortion in a British Bill of Rights that is being drafted after Brexit. And Stella Creasy, who is a Labour MP, she sits on the Women's Council, she had gone from, I think it was 2 years ago, bringing her infant into the House of Commons, even though they have daycare, which I'm against, but she could have put it in the creche in time. She made a deliberate point to bring the baby in, went from that to arguing to no restrictions on abortion and a right to abortion codified within the British Bill of Rights in law. And so they're getting pretty bold for that. And one of the reasons I think this is the case is because the UN on International Women's Day this March put out their 21 AIDS principles to govern sexual health, drug law, things like that. And among these things were abortion up until the point of birth has absolutely no restrictions for all member states. Downstream from that, it was the decriminalization of all drugs, including who was the fella from Lance from the Surfs? Who
Yeah,
said that,
Lance was
yeah.
on
yeah,
show.
yeah. That's the UN's position now. You should be able to take drugs and suffer no penalties while you're pregnant. All gender-affirming care for all ages, and they also said that there are some cases where children may be mature enough to consent.
Disgusting.
Yes, and
Disgusting.
yeah, and so this is something that is coming for most countries, probably in Europe as well. That's the case in the UK.
How
Not
does
fun.
British law work? Like, if you're talking about like York, Northumberland, do they have their own sets of rights, like state rights? Like
No. It's all centralized. It's just national to the country.
Is that also like federal police everywhere? Like in
Yeah. It's all. So we have the Met Police in London, who operate from a slightly different commissioner. I think each area has commissioners, but we can central to the government, they can set general policing law. The police in England are mad as well. I nearly got arrested last year outside Conservative Party conference. There was a video that did the rounds. What ended up happening was I went outside to film a street preacher who was arguing with some young girls who were arguing in favour of abortion just outside the secure zone, and I was filming it, and a local journalist came up to me and said, "What do you think of this?" And I went, "I've just arrived on scene, what's even happening?" And she said, "This gentleman here is saying that the LGBTQ plus community are unnatural according to scripture." And I said, "Right, well, I haven't heard any of this, but I've just been speaking to the LGBT Alliance guys in there, and they separate sexuality and gender, so that's part of the debate you have to parcel out. And the TQ plus might be harbinging something more insidious." And I said, "Have you heard of Gail Rubin?" And before I finished my thought, an inspector who had been bussed in from Kent to Birmingham, which is, Kent's the south, Birmingham's the north, that's where the conference was, ran up to me, waved his finger in my face. He had to go on his tiptoes because he's rather short. And he said to me, "Right, if you continue this conversation, I'm warning you, I will arrest you under the Public Order Offence Bill because you have insulted this woman's sexuality." Because he'd overheard the word insidious, not overheard the conversation properly. And he just said, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And when I tried to clarify and ask questions, he said, "This is not about questioning. I'm telling you what's happening here." I got surrounded by 10 other police officers, arms folded, ready to tackle me. And one guy had a shoulder-mounted camera recording the entire thing. And what they do in the UK is if you are reported for an offence, but it's not a criminal offence, you'll be registered on the non-crime hate incident registry, which means there's a black mark against your name that you never know exists, and if employers do a background check on you, even if you have been criminally charged, that will come up, and you will be turned down for jobs without ever knowing it. So I had to rely on a lovely gentleman by the name of Harry Miller. He used to work for Fair Cop, now Bad Law Project, and he got confirmation that I wasn't on that registry. We filed a complaint to the police, but it went nowhere because they protect their own. And so, yeah, England's undoubtedly a very progressive, captured country.
Can I ask you, do you feel like there's a cultural difference in the different regions? Like Northern England has a different attitude towards these things than maybe the South? Because that's what I feel is at least the stereotype in America, that we're very regionally divided. You'll hear West Coast versus, conservative Texas, perhaps.
We have something called the Red Wall in England, and that was created because when Margaret Thatcher was in power, she decided to disband industries that she thought were defunct, mainly things like coal mining. And they had been long-standing sources of community wealth, intergenerational prosperity for years, even though they weren't generating as much. And when she ripped that out, she did a lot of battle with the unions as well, and so that's that's made them more union-ish, and so they voted Labour as a part of their identity. She didn't really replace it with anything, and so up north, there's a bit of north-south antagonism. We call them northern monkeys, they call us southern pufters, and we get along with a bit of solidarity against any other country that wants to try their luck. But they have resentment of the south because they see politics as too centralised in the south, and they see it as left them behind. And this was the big difference with Boris Johnson in 2019 as well, because the north overwhelmingly voted for Brexit, thinking that we're sending too much money over to the European Union. It could be reinvested here. And Boris Johnson said, right, if you guys lend me your vote, I'll do that. I'll do a program called Levelling Up, which basically means you'll get new rail infrastructure, you'll get new job opportunities, we'll do regional investment. And the Northerners voted for him. And then they voted, obviously, for Boris because they liked him on character. He used to be the London mayor. He got stuck on a zip line. He'd wave little flags. He was like Mr. Bean. People thought he was fun. Then COVID hit. Lockdowns happened. We were imprisoned in our home for multiple years. And Boris, who professed to be a libertarian, squandered all the money away on that and then started partying while we were all locked in our homes, and that all got leaked, and it was a big scandal.
Yeah, I've heard about this. The leak of political leaders partying in England. What is the fallout from that ban?
Boris Johnson got scapegoated from it. Matt Hancock, who was the health secretary, who was having an affair with one of his aides at the time that was caught on CCTV, he lost his job, but
he really needed to social distance.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anyone ever sees a photo of Matt Hancock, I feel deeply ashamed because he was doing better with his love life under lockdown than I do, and he is not a good-looking bloke. But he hasn't lost his place in the party. Like, Boris Johnson's basically just been kicked out of the Commons. His seat is up for re-election. One of the GB News hosts, Lawrence Fox, is currently running in that, so I wish him luck.
But he really was the scapegoat. I mean, they said everything was his fault, and I feel like from my observational standpoint, the party sort of let him pay for their sins.
Yeah, take the fault. Yeah, and all of the health executives that got all the calls wrong got knighthoods. Gavin Williamson, he was the education secretary who repeatedly locked down schools, but despite being campaigned not to, he resigned from his post for a particular reason that doesn't come to mind right now. But he resigned in disgrace and then got a knighthood from it. It's like they're just buying people's silence.
What's the knighthood do?
It's just a title which confers upon you the sort of you have been endorsed by the
It's
regime.
honorific.
Do you get money for it or anything? A yearly stipend?
No, I don't think you get a yearly
Can you
stipend.
like kick people off of their land or any of that crap?
No, I don't think you get any titles. But it's basically like a
Gotta be a
regime stamp
bureaucrat
of
to do
approval.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing as well. Boris kept trying to appoint his dad a member of the House of Lords repeatedly, and Rishi Sunak shut that down. But that's absolutely to your point. Rishi Sunak is the Prime Minister right now. He wasn't elected. Like, when Boris went, the members chose Liz Truss. Now, Liz Truss is dim as a 2-watt bulb. She's not great, but she was too dumb to be on side of the global project. What we have is a bit of a split in the Conservative Party right now. With the neocons, they both share goals on Ukraine, but for different reasons. The neocons are more Cold War. The global faction are more like, we want to line BlackRock's pockets. Liz Truss was firmly in the neocon camp, and she wanted to minorly cut taxes, right? Rishi Sunak was a tax and spend guy. He was the guy that printed all the money as the Chancellor during COVID. He did the equivalent to stimulus packages. It's bankrupted the country. But they've spun the narrative as to where it's only Ukraine and the pandemic. It wasn't Rishi Sunak's fault. The members voted for Liz Truss overwhelmingly. Liz Truss gets in, and she is the shortest serving Prime Minister in history because she wanted to do like a 1% tax cut. And she announced it on a Monday. The Bank of England they published the sort of stats on the gilt market on the Friday, and the news didn't hit till the Monday, and it coincided with the fact the Bank of England realised they'd run out of money. So they used Liz Truss's policy as a scapegoat, and we know this because like Rishi Sunak immediately started spending more money, and this suddenly wasn't going to break the market. How weird. And so they got their man in. They got him in by the back door, despite him being utterly complicit in the parties and the economic damage done under the pandemic. And so, unfortunately, the British political system's kind of just reeked.
But you said that you think he'll get elected. You think the British public has embraced him as
Rishi Sunak? No, he'll lose. He'll lose. Absolutely.
So who do you think's going to win?
It'll be Keir Starmer, the Labour Party. But the interesting thing, and Matt Goodwin is a really good academic from my former university who's looked at this. 6 in 10 of people that voted for Boris, that includes those red wall people who traditionally voted Labour, flipped to Conservative, they feel so disenfranchised, they're just not voting. Because for the last 15 years, we've voted consistently for lowered immigration. Last year, under Boris Johnson, it hit net 1.1 million plus illegals. And the rate at which the illegal immigration is going up. By 2024, we're going to have more people crossing the Channel and filling up UK hotels than British men stormed the beaches of Normandy at D-Day.
My goodness.
So, yeah, this is bad. They've had all their promises broken, and so they've just decided, right, we're not flipping our votes. There's no alternatives, so we're just not voting. And so Labour are going to win by default. even though they've been utterly incompetent.
Yeah, so one thing I'd also like to ask you about is, I can't imagine the British media is too different from American media with respect to the way the border issue is addressed, or really not addressed, right? The question is always of, are we being nice enough to people who entered our country illegally, and not should we have borders? So I'm curious what some of the rhetoric surrounding that has been, differences, similarities, or if it's just kind of the same garbage that we get here.
It's similar. You'd think it would be different because we're an island, so naturally we don't have any connecting borders with countries. It's often about our obligation to take in quote-unquote refugees, but all of the people coming across are coming from France. Now, I'd flee France too, it's horrible. But loads of the so-called economic migrants, I mean, for quite a while last year, it was all Albanians. Now, Albania is not a country at war. They voted in a socialist government, so economic downturn is there, but they were being trafficked by people smuggling gangs. And then they had an Albania Day celebration where they drove very flash cars around Parliament Square and draped Winston Churchill's statue in the Albanian flag. So it was almost like a
We're
display
occupying you.
Yeah, a display of colonialism, exactly. So they've brokered a deal recently with the Albanian government, so they've stopped coming. But we're still getting loads of people from the migrant camps in Calais, from Afghanistan and North Africa and things like that. And lots of the conversation, this is mainly the Labour Party's policy, it's going to be, how do we create safe and legal routes for these people? It's never, they shouldn't be here in the first place because they don't have a legitimate asylum claim. It's like, right, how do we take them out from the hotels, which we're paying £7 million a day to put them up in? And these are hotels that people would go to work to pay to stay in on holiday. How do we move from that to just dropping them in the economy? Because we want GDP line go up. That's it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of illegal border crossings, a U.S. soldier crossed into North Korea willfully and without authorization. So a United States soldier was in custody, actually, in South Korea in a prison. He'd been held on assault charges and was facing additional military discipline. And he was escorted to the airport, but instead of getting on his flight, he basically ran away. He joined a tour group with a group of civilians who were going near the border. He escaped that tour group. He ran into North Korea. And of course, this creates a massive diplomatic problem. The United States and North Korea are not in contact with one another. But of course, the United States government is going to want to get this guy back. What could he have done that was so bad that he thought he would be better off in North Korea?
Maybe he thought every woman looked like Yeonmi Park and he thought he'd take his chances.
It's just something like that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, it's wild. It's insanely dangerous. Guy must not have been thinking. Was he drunk? What's going on?
And I
Early
wonder
20s.
now if
he's
North
20,
Korea is
you know?
going to be like, it's great that you're here. Just tell us about your job.
Oh, for sure.
Let's hear what's going on. They are being very mean to you, that American military. We don't like that at all.
Actually, Ian just raised a perfect point. Early 20s. I do think that might factor in because there's a lot of danger tourism. Like one of the guys that we work with in Lotus's office, Kellen, went over to Afghanistan. Serge is nodding his head. He went over with Lord Miles. And I don't know if anyone knows, but there was an update from the Taliban today of Lord Miles is still being very politely, very securely, very friendly held by the Taliban. So this might be a sort of danger tourism thing of where he's going, well, this looks like a crazy place nobody's been to. Maybe I'll try my luck.
I mean, to that end, we should point out that Otto Warmbier was the last high profile, at least. He's not the most recent American to have gone over, but he was a college student. He had gone over because he wanted to see the world. He wanted it to be interesting, and apparently he stole a poster and got held for years and years and ended up dying.
That's right.
Shortly after Trump negotiated his return.
I think that he said someone in his church group claimed that if he brought something back that they would give him a car, something wild like that. And
Sure.
yeah, so the dude was sentenced to 10 years hard labor, if I'm not mistaken. That might not have been exactly, but he ended up dying before we could get him back.
Yeah, they said it was botulism that killed him, but then there are reports. Actually, there was a North Korean that had defected away from North Korea that said he was killed. He was poisoned. So that
he
wouldn't speak.
spent a long time in a coma, according to North Korea, which they just never updated anyone on. I mean, this is a complete tragedy. It's a very sad story.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make light of it, but this idea that we would have young men who think, oh, well, I'll just go to North Korea. I mean, I don't think that was necessarily Otto's motivation. I think there's probably something, very masculine and very real about wanting to see dangerous places. With this American soldier, I really think we have to question what is going on where you think running across the border to North Korea is your answer, right?
And part of the issue is America being on the world stage now, not having President Trump in office, not having the same strong but slightly strange relationship with little rocket man Kim Jong-un. How are you going to get him back? Like,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
no bargaining power to get this guy, and any of the secrets that he might know. That's a pretty precarious situation to be in.
Because initially, when this story broke, I thought, what is so bad that North Korea is the answer? But now, you may be able to live a nice life where North Korea says, thank you for all this information, for as long as they're willing to tolerate you, right? I mean, it's a very bizarre story. I have never been in a position where I think
I'd be better off in North Korea.
Just flee to North Korea.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty concerning on the macro scale, like that an American soldier would defect to North Korea of all
Yes.
places. That's really kind of freakish.
That is very
Like,
freakish.
what kind of lack of faith you would have in your military to do that to North Korea?
You know,
it has
I
happened
would
before. It has happened before.
Has
So,
it?
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
Is it people fleeing charges like this? This guy was going to get charged with assault?
No, I don't think it's fleeing charges. It's just people that have left the military and crossed the border and then have been joined. They use them for, I forget his name, is Ken, something like that. They used him for propaganda purposes.
for movies,
etc.
right?
I
Yeah,
guess.
that's
Yeah,
right.
he
If
was
there's
like a big
anywhere,
movie star, played the
anywhere you
American,
won't be
so.
extradited from, it's somewhere like North Korea.
Yeah,
So-
very true.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd think people would cross that border more often since socialism works so well. You know, it's actually
Maybe
interesting.
that's it. Maybe he's just so young that he was like, I don't like the American military anymore, and I really think socialism is it. So I'll just head on over.
Well, I'm looking for places to be refugees too, because I was talking to you guys about this off air. The UK government at the moment is passing something called the Online Safety Bill. They used to call it the Online Harms Bill. So
boy.
always the Loving Kittens and Puppies Act, and basically what it means is that it puts the UK government's arbitration body for television media that stipulates you have to be unbiased unless you're left wing, which you can get away with it, in charge of every internet broadcast show. So if you guys were broadcasting in the UK from the UK, not just streaming in the UK, then you would have to have, I don't know, like Vorsh on all the time as a guest to balance it out, and it would just derail the conversation on whatever topics you were doing. And so like our show won't operate, especially because as well the possible new prime minister wants to criminalize misgendering. So it's like, am I going to be, I don't know, crashing on a couch in Tennessee in like a year's time? Who knows? I mean, North Korea's looking real sunny this time of year compared to Britain.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not going to be the kind of political freedom you're looking for, but I hear you. England is very scary right now, and this is something that a lot of progressives neglect to acknowledge very conveniently when they talk about the kind of draconian speech codes that they want to impose socially. So they'll say things like, well, these social media companies might be censoring people, but it's done privately, and like political correctness or wokeism aren't real problems because it's all about just being polite and being a different, respectful and decent person. Of course, in Europe, people are actually prosecuted for saying things that challenge the regime that are considered, offensive, that are harmful and, quote unquote, damaging to the LGBTQ community. It's easy to forget this as an American, that in the Western world, there are people who are criminally charged for saying things that fly in the face of left-wing orthodoxy. There are people who are criminally charged for saying, effectively, men are men and women are women, and I'm not going to call a man a woman or a woman a man.
And there
Yeah.
are people who cheer this on, right? You'll get people who will say, yes, you should absolutely pass that bill because I don't want to hear these things. And I don't want other people to hear these things I don't even know what you're saying, but I have heard are offensive. And that's what's the most disturbing to me, that we have a complete lack of regard for the fact that someone whose opinion is different than you might not be hateful, right? It's just different. We live in a culture that breeds fear, which begets compliance. And I find that to be so disturbing.
You're allowed to hate. I mean, in the United States, you're allowed to hate. It's totally cool. As long as you don't commit a crime, you can hate all you want. I don't like this hate crime crap. I don't know. Like, what is how do you know what if they had hate in their heart when they were saying or doing?
Sorry, but like,
Yeah.
since when did you murder someone out of love? Like,
Yeah,
what
even,
the hell?
even the crime of passion is hatred in the moment. So it's complete nonsensical. We've got two pieces of legislation in the UK that really screw us over. It's Section 127 of the Communications Act of 2003. That means that if you say anything that can be deemed, quote, grossly offensive over a digital platform, as long as they find someone who's offended by it, or even in the case of Count Dankula, they couldn't, but the Scottish government prosecuted him anyway, you can be prosecuted for saying something that offends someone. And then we also have the Equalities Act, which creates a sort of hierarchy of protected characteristics. And the frustrating thing is, and this is why, and I don't wish to disparage some of the TERFs, even though I find the label radical feminist sends a shiver up my spine.
It should.
Yeah.
But they're the only good feminists in a lot of ways.
My friend Mary Harrington and the reactionary feminists would seem to dissent on that point, but I don't want to get too derailed. The feminists are using the Equality Act legislation to fight the reason that they are being prosecuted under the Equality Act. So they just got like gender critical beliefs added to the Equality Act, but it's like you're just stacking more protected characteristics on top of each other. So it's just going to be more absurd. What you need to do is jettison the protected characteristics framework and have something akin to an American First Amendment. Except we don't have a written constitution because that's kind of anathema to our country.
Yeah, you mentioned this thing also about the court system and Dankula and this case. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't the opinion handed down that context didn't matter?
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That you could have a governing legal authority, a judge, say that context doesn't matter.
He took
That's
it to
insanity.
pretty much every court that he could, and they still wouldn't take it.
Context matters. In an example of that is like jaywalking. If you, of course it's illegal, but if there's a baby in the middle of the road and cars coming, you run out in the street and grab the baby and take him to the sidewalk. You violated the law. No one's going to prosecute you for that. Context matters.
I don't think jaywalking
Exactly.
is even illegal in the UK. But the
Wow,
reason,
maybe you're the land of the free.
yeah, it's an every man for himself. The interesting thing though is that we have abolished forgiveness, and Seamus will agree with me on this. When we've become a post-Christian culture, we like to pretend we're a post-religious culture, but they're just a religion without a metaphysic.
That's right.
We now have a one-strike rule that brands you the Scarlet Letter forever, and the reason we do that as well is because we have met so many of our material needs that now we have moved on to the recognition economy. This is why there's so many information sector jobs like social media or HR or marketing. And this is why there's an infinite number of fractionating pride flags. People want to codify their personality type and demand that you affirm them because their unsettled screaming consciences, their anxieties, them doing something behind closed doors that they know is kind of sordid, they need you to affirm them.
Exactly.
And any time you don't, it's a transgression on their identity, and so it's akin to violence. And that's the situation we've ended up in.
No, that's exactly what it is, and I think you put it perfectly. They're screaming consciences. Effectively, when they see you criticize them, and in fact, not even necessarily just when they see you criticizing them, when they just see you living and acting like a normal person, having a normal life, and not engaged in the degenerate nonsense that they're engaged in, they are bothered by it because you, in that moment, are a proxy for their conscience. They see what they could be. So this idea that what I do behind closed doors doesn't matter. Yes, of course. Your bedroom door has magical properties such that it totally erases the consequences of your actions from your psyche. And when you go into the outside world, your behavior is not modified, and the way you interact with the rest of us isn't modified or effective by what you've done in there. It's nonsense.
Yeah, you need to create that, whatever sort of thing you're doing, as being the new societal standard so that you aren't tripping around it like a minefield in every conversation you have. And then you need people to celebrate it so that it makes you feel better about yourself, because just being accepted, not being a special little snowflake, is not enough if you have crippling social anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's the important argument for religion. I know there are criticisms of organized religion, but having something larger than yourself means that you don't need to seek affirmation from a crowd of people or whoever's trendy right now, whoever says, well, I know how you can feel like you're doing the right thing and we'll praise you for doing this. Like, it's such a damaging way to live your life that I am surprised that, well, I'm not surprised because our culture thrives on insecurity. It's funny to me that they can't look themselves in the face and see, oh, I can see the cycle I'm trapped in. I'm never good enough for this ideology that actually hates me and would be fine if I got destroyed because it betters their own agenda.
Yeah, well, and also, sorry, I'll let you jump in a second because I want to hear
from
from
you. The way
you.
you said that, thinking about that people being used as pawns to forward a political agenda, like if like someone that identifies as a trans female goes into a shooting rage and then is killed by the police, it's like, oh, trans rights, and it's like, what do you mean? That's not
They
what this
weren't
is
given
about.
the support they needed. Like,
Well,
the justifications become insane because we are willing to defy logic to protect certain people if they fall into certain ideological classes.
It's totally circular. You remember 7 Victims?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, what's that?
Yeah.
So after the
Audrey Hale.
Oh,
yeah.
that's
after
exactly what I was just thinking about.
Yes,
Audrey
yeah,
Hale.
exactly. So in Tennessee, when those Christian children were murdered by a person who identified as transgender, because they identified as transgender, left-wingers who had invaded a Capitol building, I believe was the Capitol they invaded in the state of Tennessee as well, they were saying that there were 7 victims there because they considered the shooter to have been a victim. And this is because, like, victimhood in their mind is merely a question of identity. If you are in a victim class, everything you do is a manifestation of your victimhood. And if you're in an oppressor class, everything you do is a manifestation of your oppressiveness. So, of course, this person person was a victim. They have to be a victim. They're always going to be a victim.
And there's glory in being a victim, right?
Yes.
Being a
Well,
victim means that all of these
to them, yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say for us. For them, being a victim means that somebody is going to champion you and give you special privileges. And I have to be more understanding because I couldn't possibly understand what you're going through and the hardships and this, that, and the other. Instead of a culture that encourages you to know yourself well, to live by strong values, they're saying just completely fall apart, and then someone else will tell you when you're okay or not.
I think there's some value to equity. Like, I'm all about equality over equity. Like, you ever see that meme of the three people, the short guy, the medium-sized guy, and the tall guy trying to look over a fence, and only the tall guy can see, but there's 3 boxes, and each of them have 1 box. So the tall guy can see, the medium guy and the small guy can't see. So, or it's the other two, the medium guy and the tall guy can see, the small guy can't see. So they say equity, and they give the boxes of the tall guy to the small guy. And now the small guy, now they can all see. But so I understand a little bit of that sometimes, maybe, man, but not like an entire society built around kneecapping the best among us to propel those that can't.
To your example, what they're saying is the tall guy should have to kneel down and not look past the fence at all.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Because he's gotten to watch this baseball game for too long.
He doesn't need it. He can still see without the box, so they take his box away and give it to someone else.
And what I'm saying is, they're saying that's not enough. They should dig a hole and so we can't see.
But hold on, but this is also really important because a lot of people fail to recognize this. Even if you want to buy into this worldview, we say like people you have to be given exactly what they need in order to be equal to other people. How on earth do you have any idea what it is about a person that makes them unequal to other people? How could you possibly say you have an answer to that question? People are unbelievably complex and intricate. The idea that you could just like rearrange material reality to the point where everyone's on an equal playing field is complete nonsense.
And in the United
States,
insane. All men are born created equal. Like that's
kind
implicit.
Of a myth, though.
Well, we're not all
You're
the
just
same.
jealous because we left your country.
We're not all the same, but we're
look where it's gotten.
We didn't say Brits are created equal to us.
No,
right?
Whoa, that's a hate crime.
I prefer the St. Augustine thing of men are not born free and equal. They're born in urine and excrement. We are born inextricably dependent from one another.
That's true.
And this is why. And to tie up the materialism versus metaphysics, what you're proximate to, what higher ideal you both serve, but can never be too excessive in trying to embody, but not circumventing. The reason Audrey Hale was lionized as a martyr to the trans cause is twofold, and this is why I think Marxism and liberalism are twin cheeks of the same materialistic backside. Marxism,
yes, they are.
In all of the Marxist literature, you will see that because the superstructure, the oppressive, engineered inequities by capitalism is inescapable, then if you set up a revolution, all revolution is just self-defense. You'll see this in Engels, Marx, and Rosa Luxemburg, revolutionary communists, the Polish. The other side of that is that with liberalism, you're right. You can never actually quantify how much freedom someone has. If freedom, autonomy, maximum material benefits with minimal social reliance is the goal, like Rousseau would do, right? You can't itemize that. All you can do is go on an eternal crusade of things which are seen as impediments to you being a fully autonomous individual. This is something called comprehensive liberalism. Claire Chambers has written about it. She's a total mad woman. Go down a rabbit hole. My colleague Carl and Stelios have got a great video on it on the website. And so this is why they're very similar. Both have a Promethean ambition. Both seek to generate endless, insatiable desires. They use tech to do so. This is why the recognition economy has come out of the material deficit economy. All you can do to correct that measure is have humility in proximity to the highest possible love, which I have learned and would say is God.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And to also reference Augustine, he said that man has as many masters as he does vices. And so this idea of freedom, as we generally conceive of it, merely being a product of the ability to have multiple choices without reference to your internal discipline is totally nonsensical. And speaking of that kind of worldview and what it leads to, we have a story here of a pro-euthanasia activist who's been convicted in the Netherlands of sending suicide kits to 1,600 people. This is the inevitable outgrowth of materialism, the belief that freedom is simply a product of making multiple choices and has nothing to do with what the right or wrong choice is, as well as a person's virtuous predispositions or lack thereof, or what man is meant to do and whether he's free to flourish in the role that he was built for rather than the one he has chosen for himself irrationally. The activist, Alex S., was selling kits to people who didn't qualify for the legal assisted suicide program. And according to the court, the activist convinced people that the drugs were painless, but in reality, they suffered, quote, severe distress and panic, which led to a gruesome death. But it actually gets even worse than that. In April, the Netherlands announced plans to expand the assisted suicide and euthanasia program to allow children ages 1 to 12-year-olds to be
What?
eligible. Yeah.
What? A 1-year-old can opt for suicide medically?
He can't.
What the
His
hell?
parents can.
What? That's murder. You can't. A 1-year-old cannot opt in to get themselves killed. That's a parent doing it to the kid.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sickening. It's completely sickening.
This is what my friend Mary Harrington has referred to as the sort of war on Imago Dei. It's the idea that the human body is sacred in any way, shape, or form, and you can't just exit it or mutilate it at any time. And what we're seeing in relation to materialism is it's either the body is a prison. Not everything is Gnosticism, people. Get that out. But the trans identity is a form of Gnosticism where your body is a fleshy prison and you have to approximate it to feel who you truly are inside.
That's right.
Is true. So there's no sacredness about the body you were given. You just play mix and match with the appendages until you feel okay. Or there's the attitude that your body is kind of a vessel of gratification. It's just the means by which you feel around in a purely sensory world. And so when you stop being capable of that sensation, when you stop being able to be pleasure seeking because you have a terminal illness or you're old or you're just depressed and you don't feel anything anymore, then they say, well, it's perfectly logically consistent to exit. And their only complaint is that you are suffering, not that you are achieving the ultimate suffering, which is just the extinguishing of your conscience.
Exactly. Well, okay, that's a very important point, and I would frame it very similarly. Once you have made the meaning of life pleasure, once a person is no longer able to, or at the very least less capable of experiencing subjectively pleasurable states, then their life no longer has meaning. If the purpose of life, if the meaning of life goes deeper than your own particular emotions about the situation that you're in, then no amount of suffering actually justifies ending the life of a human being directly and intentionally.
Yeah, this is classic Solzhenitsyn existentialism. This is, and if you ever want to sort of escape, I've suffered with depression all throughout my life, I'm not going to minimize it, but if you ever want to get perspective, read the accounts of the people that have suffered the most and that you will probably never suffer, and they have come through it with sincere metaphysical convictions and faith in humanity. Viktor Frankl's wrote about this, Solzhenitsyn's written about this. If they can survive a gulag or a concentration camp, you can survive not being able to access Pornhub in your state because Utah's blocked it. Like, that's just it.
And Utah blocked it because kids weren't able to look at it. What an important detail of that story. And but before I pass to you, Ian, I just want to mention here with what you just said. I agree with you that when you look at people who have experienced the most tremendous suffering, they tend to be deferential to a higher power. They believe in morality. They believe in meaning. And of course, that's because experience is an expensive classroom, and those who have paid the greatest price often have the greatest knowledge, but also because I believe those situations actually select for people who have a deeper view of what existence is that goes beyond pleasure. Because if you don't view that to begin with, or you don't come to believe that at some point through that experience, you're just going to
it's a crucible for spiritual formation, yeah.
Well, being in the gym, man, with a personal trainer being like, you're 12 more reps. Now we're going up weight. Now we're going 25 pounds. That's like hell. It's like being in a kind of personal hell for a moment, just a moment. But after coming out of it, it's like, I don't want to kill myself anymore. I've already been through it, man. God is good. Like, this life is fucking great.
And that independent spirit is why MSNBC came out the other day and said lifting weights is right wing. Because you're an independent thinker. Once you master your own body, you're not contingent on other people's stimulants or pleasures to try and sedate that screaming conscience, then the universal homogenous state can't have you in their clutches.
Shoot, man. Yeah, I got to get way more right wing. I'll have to hit the gym with you.
Man.
Yeah.
But
Next Monday,
one point that you mentioned here is that's like your own personal hell. There's something here. There's actually something that touches on an important part. No, I know, but this touches on an important part of like the Christian tradition, which is dying to yourself. It's like to describe it as hell in some senses, describe it as like a small death. Like you are willfully embracing a form of death, but what is the outcome of that? A resurrection. Your muscles get stronger. You actually strengthen yourself because you've willfully embraced that small death.
Literally tearing your muscles, bleeding on the inside so that it can forge and regrow stronger and bigger.
Yeah, that small death has like led to a small resurrection in a sense. And I think we see that with all productive things that are painful, right? If you really buckle down and do your job, even though it's difficult, there's like a small death. You feel, oh, it's so beautiful outside. I don't want to work right now. But then when all is said and done and you've created this, it's like this moment of resurrection. You've created something beautiful because you willingly embrace that.
Yeah,
death.
I think there's a resistance to accepting that glory comes through struggle, right?
Yeah, yes.
Glory is through a lot of things, and there's a fear of hardship, right? So when we talk about censoring people's language or saying, you have to call me by these things, you need to make me feel good about myself, we are encouraging a culture that is avoiding challenge and avoiding personal growth through challenge. And I think that is what's most devastating to people today, is that you can never feel true satisfaction without really feeling you've achieved something. And sometimes achievement comes at a cost. I agree with you. I think you can't minimize, how crippling depression, anxiety, some of the emotional states that people go through can be. On the other hand, working through your struggle is ultimately how you become a better and stronger version of yourself.
Amen.
And it gives you a perspective that you are, I personally feel like, meant to have, right? You want to have insight into the world that makes you more in touch with the human condition.
I'm thinking about meditation. That's another struggle, because it's easy to think. It's easy to get distracted and think about the colors you see or the noise you're hearing, but to have no thoughts, that's a challenge, and it is hard.
That's why prayer is a lot easier, because all you do is externalize your thoughts and you give it up to the big man upstairs and he can walk you through it. Rather than try and force yourself to be completely blind, you just vent your conscience out and you actually have a dialogue with someone that can help you out.
And there's also, I would say, there's also a discipline and difficulty to prayer, which is kind of touching on part of what you're saying, which is, even though I don't recommend the form of meditation you're describing, I agree that there's something very difficult about not just allowing your internal monologue to drag you everywhere without taking a moment to reflect about what you're thinking about, what you're orienting yourself towards. It's really important, I believe, to develop a prayer life, in part to escape that just constantly being led around by that almost nagging, that very ADHD jump from subject to subject to subject, just based on whatever enters consciousness.
You know why I don't pray by saying things in my thoughts? I just have no thoughts, is because I feel like it's polarizing to choose this is what it's going to be. Like, with no thought, I'm not deciding it's got to be this now. I get concerned about polarizing my behavior in my mind.
That's interesting. So here's what I would say. When you're allowing yourself, and we all do this, right? And this is what we're trying to escape in some sense. When we allow ourselves to just be dragged around from thought to thought, in that instance, we're actually not choosing what we're thinking about, right? We're just being led. And I think to jump to another state where you're trying to suppress all thought, I would say you're also just not choosing a particular thought. And so that's why I would say prayer is actually the opposite of just letting yourself being led around. And it does require choice, but your thoughts being dragged everywhere doesn't require a choice, right? You're just kind of letting it happen.
But it gets to a point where you're not suppressing the thoughts anymore. They just stop coming into your head. And it'll be 40 minutes will go. You'll be 5 seconds, and then you realize you're thinking. You're like, okay, let it go. No thought. And then some time goes by, and you're like, I was thinking for a few minutes or a few seconds. Okay, let it go. And then all of a sudden it's longer, 8 seconds. Then it's 20 seconds. You have no thought. Then all of a sudden you can do it for 5 minutes, and you're like, whoa. Then all your emotions, they're back to baseline.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We'll have to discuss it, because again, I've made my thoughts about that form of meditation clear, but it'd be a cool discussion for the after show too. I think to get into some of that stuff, and then just with reference to what Hannah Claire was saying about making yourself better, I just want to mention this before we move on from the topic. You made this point, becoming a stronger, better version of yourself. If you believe that there is a telos, that there is a purpose, that there is a reason you are here, then achieving that purpose is what you're supposed to do. And a struggle is something that you may have to embrace in order to reach that fulfillment, in order to fulfill your purpose. And you can get pleasure from that. Of course, naturally, there's a natural pleasure that comes from doing things the right way. And when you develop virtue, there's a pleasure that a person can get from doing something virtuous. That said, I think the modern conceptualization, which is just feel good about things, of course, can't contend with that. And what ends up happening is your mission is not necessarily to become a better version of yourself. It's just to maximize positive experiences and minimize displeasurable experiences. And so what that results in is basically a philosophy that I don't think can argue against the best possible state to be in is a simulation where everything goes well for you and not living in the real world doing difficult but important things.
Where you get whatever you want, because it's completely about self-indulgence. And in that, you are never able to experience true joy or happiness, because it's all about momentary, immediate pleasure, right? I mean, some of the challenges that we're talking about, when you bring up working out, is that long term, you're going to feel the benefits of it. It's not that every single day when you're lifting the weights is super fun, right? You're exhausted, you're tired. It's that ultimately these things are worth it, and that you stay on the path because you know you're achieving something great through the sacrifice and struggle that it takes. mistakes.
I do like yesterday. I was playing "Drops of Jupiter" by Train, and I start crying, man. I think about my mom, and he's singing about his mom in that song, and she died, I guess, and her soul's out there, and it comes. It's just like, but then I feel like it's like, yeah, it hurts and it's painful, it's sad, but then I'm normal. Like it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to put
You can bear
Xanax
suffering, as it
in your
turns
brain.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point too. Like trying to get through things without medicating yourself.
But also not to get addicted to the pain, because it can become like the crying. I was like, I couldn't keep doing it. I'm like, oh, I feel and I want. I'm like, no, just breathe and kind of let it out. You know, it comes. You don't force it onto yourself. It just happens.
Yeah, I mean, more difficult is not necessarily better. I agree with you, right? Like you can't just make it about embracing something difficult, because sometimes something which is more difficult is not necessarily the best path for you.
Yeah, don't martyr yourself. Live as the ideal instead.
Yeah,
That's the way to go.
yeah, that's a fair
Say
point.
that again.
Don't martyr yourself. Live as the ideal instead.
Oh yeah, dude.
Well, we were just talking a moment ago about jumping from thought to thought versus trying to push all the thoughts out of your head. Our next story involves a man who I'm not sure which category to place him in there. Is this someone who doesn't have thoughts? Is this someone who's led around from thought to thought? I am not sure, but he is our president, the one and only Joe Biden, and his administration says, surprise, surprise, they think that SCOTUS got it wrong after striking down student loan forgiveness. Of course he does. I mean, it's ridiculous. If you want to sit here and make the argument that student loan forgiveness is a good program, I'll disagree with you for some reasons I've laid out last night, and which I'll summarize again in a moment here. But ultimately, the idea that it is an infringement of people's rights, that the Supreme Court is failing to stick to constitutional ideals by not allowing Joe Biden to redistribute wealth from people who didn't receive higher education or who paid off their loans to people who did receive higher education and or didn't pay off their loans, or I should say, and didn't pay off their loans, not and or, is totally insane. So I rattled off some statistics last night. People who graduate with a PhD earn something like $99,000 a year as their median income, and their unemployment rate is about 1.1%. People with masters will earn a median income of about $78,000. Their unemployment rate is slightly higher, but nothing too terrible. Then when you go down to people who only have a high school education, their median income is about $38,000 a year, and they have a 4-point-something% unemployment rate. So the idea that people who haven't received higher education, who are making significantly less money and have a higher unemployment rate, should have their wealth redistributed in order to pay for people who did receive a higher education and who are now in the workforce with a higher earning potential, despite taking anywhere between 4 and 8 years out of the workforce in order to attain that degree, and in many cases paid for some of their living expenses rather than just their education with those loans. I think it's just totally insane. It's totally unfair, aside from being unconstitutional. I gotta argue that should be the state of affairs.
I gotta ask, because I talked to my mother about this a couple days ago, and I was like, I'm not comfortable. She's like, oh yeah, they're starting to stop him from, but Ian, you need, and I'm like, I'm not comfortable getting other people to tax money to pay off my debt. And she's like, no, it's only the billionaires' taxes that are getting used. Not true. So this is the media. I mean, she watches MSNBC.
Yeah.
I guess they're just kind of subtly not telling you the guys that make $16 an hour at McDonald's are going to have to pay your taxes for me to get my student loans paid. I mean, fortunately I'm not in that bracket now. It's well, so what happened is I got an email from the department. It's not Biden. He's not even doing it with his mouth. He's doing it with the Department of Education. I got an email from them that said, we think the Supreme Court got it wrong. This is like 4 days ago or something. So we're going to do it anyway, but we're going to do it with people that are making up to $65,000 a year or something like that. And if you don't want it, opt out, but otherwise we're just going to do it.
Well, I think part of this for Biden is it's a make or break issue for him, because he campaigned so hard on, I will get your student loans forgiven, right? And so now we're getting desperate. We're getting closer to election season, and he needs to make progress on this issue. Otherwise, a lot of his young voter base is going to say, but you said you'd pay off my debt and you didn't. I mean, I have never understood how Joe Biden is a viable candidate for Democrats anyways, but it's important to note how big of an issue this was. This was a deciding factor for young voters. Understandably so, because I don't disagree with Seamus. On the other hand, the reality is, if you have tons of student loan debt because you were told, hey, go take out a loan, pay for your education, and it'll all work out, and you are feeling the consequences of that, I would also be looking for a way to get out of this, right? I would also be looking for help. And Joe Biden is failing on that front.
Yeah.
Not that he shouldn't, but you can see where it becomes.
One underlying theme of all of our conversation tonight has been the fostering of dependency by being godless, materially contingent, and now the reason they're pushing for this, and I think we've got a model over in the UK, is because university attendance in the UK is much higher. Because Tony Blair wanted, I believe it was about 50% of all, at least, of all young people in the UK to go to university. Then the Cameron years pushed it up, so they made you stay in higher education until 18 so they could fudge the unemployment numbers. And also because student loans are a lot less and they're taxpayer guaranteed. So they've just jumped them up significantly. I think they've doubled them. But I paid about £9,000 a year plus a maintenance loan that's means adjusted, so I had about £4,000. So I've left with about £40,000 in debt in total. And we pay that back over the course of about 30 years. So we won't pay it back until we're about 50. And what they want to do is get you into the institution which engenders a certain kind of managerial mindset. It's a self-propagating managerial class, like James Burnham would have talked about. And then you're sort of imbibed in sectionality, and you become the perfect kind of compliant corporate drone who says whatever they can to get ahead. And what Biden wants here is to create a dependent class. Both they want to vote him in so they can alleviate the debt, and if you have a lot of debt, then of course you want the big government to come and manage the economy to get rid of it, and also self-propagate more people going to university so they're not as scared about racking up all this debt, so then they're more compliant with his edicts in the future. It's a genius self-propagation strategy.
Yeah.
No wonder the Democrats want to push it.
I think it is also interesting, this idea of getting people massively in debt to the point where they don't have the kind of economic leverage that they ordinarily would, without also giving them some kind of property to show for it. I mean, this is absolutely massive. This is one of the reasons I'm somewhat sympathetic to the people who say they want student loans to be forgiven. There's actually a few reasons. Ultimately, I don't agree with it for the reasons I laid out earlier. You make way more money with a degree. People who are making less money shouldn't have to pay your degree off. You still generally end up making way more over the course of your life than the degree ends up costing. But that said, I believe in property ownership. I believe that one of the best economic strategies is to create the conditions for the largest amount of people to have property as is possible, so that everyone has a stake in the system. Everyone does actually have a material stake in the future as well. I think when you're a nation of renters, it becomes a lot more difficult to get people to care about a neighborhood or a region. And this is also part of why it's so insidious that organizations like BlackRock and a lot of these investor buyers have been swooping in and getting all of the real estate in this country and driving prices up for residential owners. And so I'm sympathetic to the argument, even though I don't agree with student loan forgiveness, that we have effectively created a class of people who have the worst of both worlds. They're heavily in debt, so they lack leverage, but they also don't, along with that debt, have the leverage that comes along with property ownership.
It's even worse in the UK. So in 1997, before Tony Blair did education and immigration reforms, house prices were 3 times median income. Now it's 11.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, we only build 200,000 homes a year. We have net intake of 1.1 million immigrants, plus the people they're battery farming in these hotels. Migration Watch UK has estimated that because, and this is the Office for National Statistics that have found that migration is the leading cause of population increase in the UK, because we've got a sub-replacement birth rate, as do most places.
Most Western countries, most developed.
And higher education is a cause of that. I spoke to Stephen Shaw, a documentary filmmaker, and he said that this is one of the main reasons why people are delaying having kids, is because they're spending up until their mid-20s, their peak fertility years in universities. But Migration Watch found that by 2046, the rate of population increase that the UK is experiencing will have to have 15 to 18 new cities the size of Birmingham to accommodate that. We can't build it, and the reason they're not building it, and this is the final point, is that 25% of the Conservative Party's donors are property developers. So they have the perverse incentive to both keep prices high enough that they're making a return on investment, but then keep a steady stream of inflated demand, so they keep building these terrible new houses that are unfit for living and are basically just knocked up new builds where the like garden fences are like that. So it's the worst of both worlds in my country.
Yeah, I'd also like to mention one more thing, which is that Biden's student loan repayment changes could cost around $475 billion. We've been talking a lot about the negative economic impact in an abstract, though valid way. However, these are the material figures, $475 billion. That's
the Fed will just print that in an afternoon. It's fine, guys. That'll have no consequences at all.
It never has, right? When has printing way too much money ever gone badly for a country?
Oh yeah.
goodness.
I mean, they just act like money doesn't mean anything. These numbers are ridiculous. And I think that's partially because, in my opinion, the Democratic Party relies on fixing things in the immediate short term to maintain power, and they just kick the problems down the line. In fact, they're more likely to blame someone else, right?
Yeah.
I think it's think it's a broken system, and I am sad for the people who have to deal with the consequences. But I don't think that student loan debt forgiveness is the answer the way
Agreed.
that it's being proposed. And part of that for me is it all goes back to a huge cultural shift. I mean, you might be able to speak to this more than I can, but our education system demands that you make it through 12th grade. And then when you go to 12th grade, you're supposed to leave and go to college. And you're supposed to go for a degree. And increasingly they say, well, if you really want to make more money, you should get a master's degree. So that's an additional 1 to 2 years, right? And well, let's not forget about the medical professions and going to law school. So you're in school forever, creating intense debt and also being reliant on a system. I think that the American education system needs a complete overhaul that encourages independent thought, because it should encourage self-dependence and self-reliance. I think that is ultimately what I don't like, and it's why it's important when you have these conversations about, well, if you don't go to college, what are your options? And in America, we desperately need people to go into the trades, which you can have a successful living without taking on debt, and in some ways have a more free life, right? If you are shackled to student debt, you have to be conscious of that in how you financially plan for your life, even though you have this high-paying degree. Whereas if you are able to start making significant amounts of money at a young age, imagine all the things that you could do and the investments you can make and the changes that you could have.
Yeah, if you want to work on if you want to be an electrician, you can also be a YouTuber. You can be an artist and a craftsman now in this world, and you can make a lot of money, and you don't need to go to school for it. You can learn the trade online. That's the overhaul I think we need, is people need to take it seriously. The data's there. It is available on the internet. Well, you taught yourself to animate at the age of 12 or something.
Yeah,
right?
I started when I was 12.
No, you're like now you're like a quadrillionaire.
Until YouTube locks you out of your account, of course.
So we should mention that. I did get locked up. So we're still not waiting. There were
for people who don't know,
long
what's
story
going
short,
on?
yeah. So I have a large YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes. We have 877,000 subscribers. I make animated cartoons there. What happened was I have a podcast on Rumble called Shamer. There was another YouTube channel that was pirating all of our content and uploading it without our permission. We've been trying to flag them to get them taken down, because we have our own Shamer channel on YouTube that we are posting clips to, and it's been overshadowed in the algorithm by this imposter. And so myself and many people were kind of flagging to try to get it, to bring it to YouTube's attention. Nothing happened. And so I just flagged some of their content, and then YouTube did take some of it down. And because I was able to prove that this is content that was mine originally, that came from my Rumble channel. And then we flagged some more of it. And what happened was, and by we, I mean me, I just sat at my computer and flagged a couple more videos and just showed that they were uploaded without my permission, where they came from originally. They were the exact same videos, exact same titles, exact same lengths, not mirrored or anything like that. And YouTube said that the claims were fraudulent and that it was removing all of the channels associated with the channel that I made the claim from. So I got an email for every YouTube channel that I run from that email address that it had been taken down. And it didn't mention Freedom Tunes, and Freedom Tunes is still up, but all related channels are deleted, and I cannot log into Freedom Tunes. Every single time I try to, there's no interface for me to do anything. It just takes me back to my other Google accounts. So I've reached out to the people at Google to see if we can get this fixed. I've reached out to the people at YouTube. I tweeted about it a little bit earlier today. Let's hope and pray that we're able to get this sorted out.
My favorite part of this was YouTube responded to you on Twitter saying, no, you don't understand. You just have to take down your fraudulent content. Like the
and I was like, no, yeah, I was like, that was not
my content.
I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I was accused of making a false copyright claim when I didn't. The claim was like blatantly true. Like, I posted my video on Rumble, which was identical to the video this person posted on YouTube a day later and had the same title and was the exact same content.
All I can see.
So yeah, we're locked out of Freedom Tunes right now because of all this.
All I can see is if you flag the same video from 3 different accounts, they're like, hey, you can only flag it from one account.
Yeah, but that's not what happened. That's not what happened. I was using the channel. It was a clips channel for my Shamer podcast. And I flagged it from there because that seemed to be the most appropriate channel to do it from, since that's the one that was being overshadowed in the algorithm by this other Shamer channel. And yeah, they said all the other channels linked to it were being removed.
Open it up, guys, because he's been stressed. It's not good. We need to get the channel.
Do you think they were just punishing you for having Rumble exclusive?
I don't know about that, because it also affected my Freedom Tunes channel. And you're right that could still be a punishment. I don't want to assume that this was like politically motivated or malicious. I think it's
from YouTube.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think
tweet
here's
angels.
the thing. It seems to me like something that could just be a massive mistake. Here's the thing. I don't know if they have an AI algorithm doing this. If they do, I still think it's really remarkable that it would consider this claim fraudulent, considering it is the exact same video both places, uploaded a day before on my channel. And also, oh, by the way, this channel that was uploading my stuff, now they just uploaded a full Steven Crowder video. So I don't know how much more obvious it has to be that a channel is fake and pirating content, but it's still up there and my channels are all taken down and we can't get into Freedom Tunes.
No, you're mistaken because you're hosting for Tim this week. He's taking over your channel, right?
Oh,
That's how this
Tim
works.
has the creds.
So Tim,
Crowder is filling in for you
take
as
my
you fill in for
password.
Tim.
Yeah.
Like
See,
really,
I
really crappy
I thought you were going over to the UK at some point, and I thought that would.
So that's still going to happen. Yeah, I'm still working on that.
Yeah, so I thought that you wouldn't be here, and actually the show would get the raw end of the deal of the Irish Catholic Exchange program. I'm glad we're both in the same room together.
That's right. Tim would send his Irish Catholic away over to England, and then you guys would get one back here. No, we're both in the same room together because I sent Tim away.
I want to just, before we move on to the next topic, I want to tap out on student loans, because what I think the biggest problem is that, one, it's not cool to go tax a bunch of people that aren't asking for it to pay off my loans. That's not cool. It's also not cool to print a bunch of money without anybody's authority, because it diminishes all of our purchasing power, makes the dollar worth 98 cents or 96 cents or whatever. That's not cool. What would be interesting is if they told the loan agencies, we're not giving you the interest back. All that collateral loan, all this compounding interest, you're not getting any of it back. I would even go so far as to say, you're not getting any of the loans back. And now that might destroy the economy. So I haven't looked too deep into what that would do, how it would rattle the system. But I think the compound interest is predatory. I don't think it's ethical. It's usurious. And I think that our government would have a right to say, you're not getting the compound interest back, and then cut it out of everyone's debt. No printing.
I would tend to agree. I think there are a lot of problems with interest, especially compounding interest. I understand that because we have a economy and a government that's always inflating its own currency, that interest does become necessary to issue loans. But I agree with you, like the compounding interest stuff, the idea of just making absorbent amounts of money off of these loans, especially when they're federally guaranteed, just seems entirely backwards to me. The government's guaranteeing these loans. I don't know how you can make the same justification. It would seem to me that in that situation, what you would have to do if the loan was federally guaranteed is ensure that the only kind of interest imposed would be interest that kept the loan steady with inflation, so that the people who gave it out didn't lose value in the long term or lose adjusted money, but where they weren't able to profit immensely off of something where they really don't have any risk because the government has told them that they're going to get the money back regardless.
If I can make one small point on perverse profit incentives over in the UK side, we don't have the same level of interest on our loans as you guys do, and they're not nearly as expensive. But what we do have is universities knowing that their budget is government guaranteed, running up a massive debt. And so what they do is, because foreign students pay much more, they mass import students from China and India, mainly the very wealthy students over there that can pay up front. And then they build loads of student accommodation rather than the houses we were talking about that charge exorbitant prices. So what ends up happening is native British students, even though they're paying less, they're getting less quality education, they're competing for the same spots, and they're getting lower quality student accommodation, and even their student accommodation is more expensive because it's scarce. So I just think running the universities as a for-profit enterprise hasn't gone as well as some would hope.
Yeah, well, no, it's interesting. There's a similar problem that actually happens with state schools in the U.S. If you're born in a specific state, if you're a resident of that state, you live there your whole life, you are able to get a discount on the tuition. So, of course, they have an economic incentive to accept more students from out of state because they're going to end up paying the full tuition price without ever, having to give that discount. And speaking of hunting for discounts, we know a certain special somebody.
The transitions on this show.
His luggage for free.
That was Michael Knowles level smooth.
Thank you. Michael Knowles hopes to be Seamus Coughlin level smooth at some point. But the non-binary ex-Biden official Sam Brinton was on a secret taxpayer-funded trip at the time of his luggage theft. What an unbelievably fun story here. So yes, Sam Brinton of the Department of Energy was on a tax-funded trip at the time when he stole the luggage that was, or the incident where it was actually captured on footage in Nevada. I can't believe I said Nevada. Who says Nevada? It's
Nevada.
Nevada.
You do. No,
What's wrong with
Nevada.
me? No, it's Nevada.
Okay.
I don't know. It was like a speech
Chicago.
impediment moment
Let's
there
not
for a
do this.
moment
It's
there.
Nevada.
But yeah, so the trip was caught on camera. I believe this is the third time, or at least he's been accused 3 times of taking suitcases from women. And then wearing
And
their
convicted
clothing
twice.
around.
Let's
And
remember.
he's been convicted of this
gone
twice.
2 out of 3.
So it wasn't enough that he was on a taxpayer-funded trip. He also had to get free luggage. So I guess one question I have is, does this guy just not pack a bag before he goes on these trips? And maybe the reason that like he's ended up just wearing different clothing isn't just like self-expression, as he would put it, but it's like this is what's in the luggage. You just get luggage from the airport and then you put the clothes on and like the clothing that was in the luggage.
Well, Eva, how much is he stealing to continually find clothes that fit? Like, is he just playing a numbers game, or is he doing the Buffalo Bill thing of where he'll go, "Are you about size 14? Club," and then get the pre-select for the person?
I have no idea, but I don't think he's spending all that much time thinking about the luggage he gets, because there was a hilarious story a little while ago. Hannah Claire and I were talking about this before we went on air, but it was basically determined that the clothing that he was wearing was clothing which came from the suitcase of a woman who was a fashion designer.
Yes.
Yeah, so she had made a bunch of different beautiful dresses for a fashion expo. She went from Tanzania, or she's from Tanzania originally.
She's based in Houston. She's Tanzanian and traveled to DC. Was supposed to show her clothes as sort of a business deal for her, and couldn't do it because her bag went missing at Reagan Airport. And when she heard about Sam Brinton's arrest, she said, I'm going to look this up, and recognize the clothes that he has been wearing, because they're not just run of the mill. You can get them at the Gap. They are very unique. Meanwhile, so she went on Twitter for this, and it was just like, I was shortly thereafter contacted by the FBI, who was like, please give us more information. And then after that, I don't know if they're actually connected, but Sam Brinton was arrested as a fugitive from justice. He lives in Maryland because he works for DC, in connection to someone's luggage going missing from a DC airport.
Yeah.
And I find this to be so funny, because what were the odds? I mean, it wasn't like he just wore them, casually to the office. He went on to like the Trevor Projects had him on for some award, and he's wearing this thing. Can you imagine being this woman being like, I not just own that, I made that. That is my piece of clothing.
But shouldn't we as a nation all share with one another, Hannah Claire?
Don't
you think it's a bit stingy for her to say
we
that
talked
this is
about
just
the
hers?
toothbrush thing last night. I don't know.
It's like I always say, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
I quote Norm Macdonald here, and that sounds like some bleep commie gobbledygook. I'd also like to draw attention to Sam Brinton. Again, I'm just going to go on the ad hominem, Ian, because you're setting a fantastic example. That mugshot is the sleep paralysis demon that I see in my name.
Was he wearing designer clothes?
I feel like Matt Damon could play that guy. He's a little older now, but they
would
look
he want
similar.
to? Do you think it could be an interesting kind of thriller? Yeah,
dude. Lex Friedman made a hilarious observation. It wasn't even a joke. He's like, you go to the airport, you wait for 2 hours, standing in line, taking your shoes off, taking your bag out, and then when you get out of the airport, you get all done. Just take whatever bag you want.
Yeah.
And it's true. There's like you could walk out of there with like 40 bags. I mean, if you have more than one, someone will probably be like, hey, but there's no security at the bags. They just come out and anyone can grab anything. It's crazy.
It's a bizarre
you know what though?
system.
I hear you, but please don't give them
Don't
any
make it
ammunition
worse.
to make the airport more of a hassle. With that, like I think the baggage thing is us saying this is a price we are willing to pay to just not have to deal with the TSA anymore, not have to deal with any more bureaucracy. Just let me go. I'm off the plane. Let me leave.
But we didn't even need that level of bureaucracy when we were a higher trust society, and when we started mainstreaming degeneracy and importing incompatible cultures where high trust is not that same thing, the social texture phrase. And so you need increasing levels of bureaucracy to micromanage the behaviors of a dependent population.
And I would agree with you, but it's not even just that. I mean, these bureaucracies aren't even effective at combating what they're there to protect us from. The TSA has failed like 98% of its audits to try to prevent.
They're staffed by incompetent diversity hires like this.
Oh,
So
my
fortunately,
goodness.
they decide to out themselves. I mean,
I'm sorry, he is one of our leading nuclear minds in this country. I don't know what you're talking about.
oh yeah,
I mean,
he
what
lost
do
all
you
his hair
say?
from the radiation poisoning.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
seriously. No, but I think it's worth pointing out that you were saying before, is he just following people around and guessing that they're his size? He is specifically looking for female luggage. One of the examples was he stole a duffel bag, what I believe was Vera Bradley. If you know Vera Bradley, it's all very feminine prints. This person is specifically targeting women to steal from them. This is bizarre, and yet the Biden administration just tried to pretend it wasn't happening. They sort of said, oh, well, it's not employed by us. Like, we couldn't say. And now we know that actually He was acting this way while on duty for the government.
What's
well,
his
look, I
status
mean,
now?
come on, stealing luggage, sniffing kids, they're not that far outside of one another in terms of like a defiance of normal behavioral expectations. So I don't even think it's the Biden administration's worst scandal by any stretch of the
It's
imagination.
not. Isn't that
And it's not the
crazy?
weirdest thing. And by scandal, I'm not saying, well, there are worse scandals because there's political corruption. No, I'm just talking about like the weird things people in the Biden administration have done. I don't even think this is the weirdest thing. We have a vice president who cackles over Venn diagrams and who loves yellow school buses and gleefully exclaims it like she's a children's presenter on
Pro-population control.
PBS who's
Yeah,
also pro-population control.
They put a
Anyway.
Satanist in charge of monkeypox response. I mean,
Did they?
really?
Well, this
Yep.
is. I mean, and of course, the monkeypox thing. We won't get too much into detail about that, just because
It's a family-friendly show.
it is a family-friendly show. But I just find it interesting that the thing that is associated with the spread of monkeypox was like the one thing that we were not willing to prohibit because we believe so deeply in human freedom and political liberty, when we were willing to tell people not to go to their jobs or to visit loved ones in the hospital or attend funerals for loved ones during the COVID pandemic. It just shows you where the priorities of the regime are.
We just don't want to be bigoted. I mean, I think it's worth noting, we sort of talked about this before the show, but Sam Brinton is openly, I don't know, gender fluid, all sorts of interesting hobbies. He was featured in like a kink magazine. I find it not at all surprising that this person is clearly not bound by any social norms or
Yes.
values, right?
Exhibitionist kleptomaniac.
Right.
Yes,
He
okay,
has
that's
been
important.
open about this. He does not believe in the world that you live in. He does not believe in anything else. I'm sure I am getting his pronouns wrong. Of course, he's stealing bags everywhere. This last like moment of trust that we all take our own bags off the carousel does not apply to him because he
Yeah.
doesn't need to be a part of that. And it's hard for me not to read a level of entitlement into this.
Yeah, a level of entitlement. I mean, I think that's true whenever you see somebody defying social expectations, which are otherwise reasonable and acceptable and make sense. Every now and again, I get that there are barriers that need to be broken down, right? You know, I like the idea of Chesterton's fence. When you find a fence, figure out what it was for before you tear it down. And sometimes, you know, maybe that fence is for something bad and it's okay to tear it down. I'm not saying no one should ever defy expectation. But what I am saying is when someone is defying expectations, when they're tearing down fences that very clearly have a person, of course there's a sense of entitlement there.
Do you guys know what happened to Sam Brinton or what his status is right now? Was he arrested?
He got arrested at his home in Maryland most recently. So with the bag stolen in Vegas, he was convicted. He had to pay a fine. In Minnesota, a similar thing brought up on charges. There was a fine, but also he had to undergo mental health evaluations as part of sort of a deal to lessen the charges against him. I haven't gotten an update on what happened with the arrest in Maryland, which is connected to the DC airport, which presumably is this woman in Houston, unless there are more missing bags that we don't know about.
You said he
right?
fled. He was a
Fugitive
fugitive
of
of justice at some point.
That was what he was arrested under, and I'm not sure how they're interpreting
okay.
it.
I see.
I'm surprised he had to undergo a mental health examination because I can just take one look at him and see he's clearly sane. I mean, yeah.
This
I
is
think
very
that's
rude.
why they're
Yeah,
like,
but
how
they
could
wanted,
such a sane, healthy individual like you get into stealing bags? We just can't understand it.
So we actually in Britain have had two recent scandals of married men with children who have been on TV stations for a very long time. One was a newsreader, the other one hosted a daytime TV show. They have claimed mental health scares once they've been caught trying to solicit photos or hook up with young men of teenage questionable age.
Wow.
Yes. And one of them tried to get out ahead of it about a year and a half ago by saying that, I'm coming out as gay and isn't this brave? And then it turns out that he was having an affair with someone on the set. So
I have to come out as brave because otherwise you might think I'm a terrible creep.
Yeah, exactly. And what they end up doing is they retreat into saying, this is, one, it's homophobic to criticize this, and two, I've been checked into the hospital for a mental health emergency. So we're going to leave this story alone for a while.
Yeah, you have to leave me alone. Well, this is another important part of it, right? I mean, look, no one is like making the argument that every single person who struggles with any kind of perversion is trying to attack children. But the reality is, if you have they, them pronouns next to your name, any predatory behavior that you engage in is going to be defended by the media and by the left. And anyone who points out that you're doing something suspicious is going to be labeled a bigot.
But at some point, you have to actions speak for themselves. That is the way of the world. That is, if we want to survive as a species, you cannot be like, well, you hurt all those people, okay, like, no, man, if something you did, and goes for leadership as well, if something you did causes maybe a surrender in Afghanistan and the death of children and people trying to flee the country, being beheaded, like, you're on the hook for that. You can't just be like, oh, I was 85 years old and I wasn't thinking about it. Like, I want some responsibility for these behaviors. I have empathy for people with mental health issues for sure, but at some point, you got to be realistic about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have compassion for people who have mental health issues. I don't have like that much compassion for the people who elect them. I feel badly in some sense for Joe Biden, other than, he put himself in this situation to an extent. It was very hubristic. I think there's an argument to be made that because of his steeply declined mental health, that people in his family probably bear a larger brunt of the responsibility for this than we could attribute to him, though I don't want to totally remove agency from him. I mean, he has his moments, but to an extent, he seemed, at least at the time when he began running, to still be capable of making decisions. I think the people around him should have said, don't do this. You're too old. But of course not. I mean, he's a cash cow. He may, call me crazy. He may even be the big guy that Hunter was referring to.
Yeah, well, you can't blame all of his voters.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I was going to say, you can't blame all of his voters. Some of them are dead.
Yeah, I mean, look, they elected him because he's an elderly guy. They could relate.
They felt representation. Representation matters, I've heard.
Yeah, well, this is.
I think that's literally confirmed. Did they actually literally confirm that?
They found some people hadn't been taken off the voter rolls, yes. Yeah, and so, suspect.
Well,
I mean, I think ultimately with this story about Sam Brinton, so I'm gonna go back to it, is we know that we should have compassion for people who are struggling mentally or emotionally, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to excuse this behavior, right?
Or elect them.
Or in this case,
appoint them.
think that anything about what's happening is normal. And I think that's one of the reasons that really I see this story most reported by more conservative leaning outlets, because it drives home all the points of, look at this bizarre person who clearly does not respect any sort of traditional or conservative values, who would probably denounce them all. And this is one of the consequences. In fact, this is a very seemingly mild consequence because it doesn't really involve violence, right? It's theft. It's terrible. But on the other hand, we have seen more devastating results from people who are unstable in recent history.
Well, yeah.
I think that this idea that we're seeing a violation of trust, the idea that you would get to take your own bag home from the airport, should serve as evidence that perhaps if we don't have a strong moral foundation that we all agree to and adhere by, that everything starts to fall apart.
Totally agree. No, I totally agree with you on that. And I'm sure we all agree on that point. And when you look at someone like this particular character, a lot of the other people who have been appointed to positions in government lately or even elected, you kind of have to wonder how something like that could possibly have happened. Of course, that's a rhetorical question. We all know about the cultural changes that have occurred over the past several decades and the pressure that the media has put on average people. But we've rerouted our thinking towards saying it is mean, it is hurtful, it is terrible, and it is unacceptable to ever place someone in an out-group on the basis of the way that they act, the way that they choose to dress. Here's the thing. When you have a representative democracy, it's important that political leaders represent you. Who does he represent? Is this someone who represents the average person?
What are you talking about? About Biden?
Well, I think Biden's actually a fair question. It's fair to ask that question about him. I would say Sam, particularly.
Well, I don't think he wasn't elected. He was appointed.
He was appointed, yeah, but my point is...
representation matters,
yes,
hence it's a
exactly.
principle going to apply. And what he represents are degenerates who are very easy to compromise.
Yes.
And that's the perverse incentive to appoint people who are well outside the norm, because they have a stake in the regime protecting them at all times and go along with a very permissive, progressive orthodoxy.
Man, I'm very concerned with the levels of crime increases with the economy, inflation and stuff. Like, I'm not into authoritarian crackdown in any way, but at some point, well, no, I shouldn't say in any way. Like, there have been instances where countries have like uprisings and they have to have some sort of authoritarian crackdown on the uprising to preserve the country. But I don't want that. I don't want it to get to that point. It's like we should be able to talk through this and like encourage people to like stand up for themselves and take their property rights seriously.
That's very compassionate, but unfortunately, not everyone's as smart as you. That's not meant to be condescending at all. Some people only respond to incentives and not ideas. There are some people that, if given the system of permissions, will just go out and loot and burn and take what they want. And that's why Nayib Bukele cracking down on El Salvador. You see the New York Times going, "Oh, this is illiberal." It's like, yeah, but we're not going to get it wrong because they have skull face tattoos. We know who the criminals are, and then it turns out once you crack down on the criminal element, your country improves. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll mention this, Ian, you got to be careful with that. And I think maybe you're putting too much pressure on what you're supporting with the use of this term authoritarian. You're saying, well, maybe we need authoritarian crackdowns. Well, who says a crackdown is always authoritarian? If people are rioting in the streets and burning down innocent people's businesses, then they're the authoritarians. And civil authorities are just stepping in to promote the rights of the people who are being harmed by the rioters. But we're going to head over to Super Chats right now. So everybody, please smash that like button, share this video, become a member at timcast.com so you can join us in the after show at 10:10, where viewers will be calling in live to talk with us. So we have from Waffle Sensei, Tim, if you're listening, blink twice if you're in danger. He may take your spoons, he may take your beanie, but he will never take your freedom. Firstly, why would you be asking him to blink twice when you can't even see him? Does he think I'm Tim? Is the beanie working?
Ooh, it's a disguise.
Why is he quoting a Scotsman in my presence? I'm almost offended.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
It's almost a hate crime.
It
but
really
not
was
quite.
a psyop.
Yeah. It was a sign the
I
entire
think
time.
Tim is fine, you know, and sometimes people just need to step away for a little bit.
Tim
They
just
take a break.
Tim just tweeted out today he doesn't like MRIs. Did you
Tim
see?
Yeah, he doesn't
himself
enjoy
tweeted that.
MRIs.
Tim
Tim, blink
personally
twice.
tweeted that.
Blink twice, T-Bone.
So
Regenerate slowly, my man.
we have from Raymond G. Stanley Jr. Seamus, well done last night. Cheers. Thank you. Have you seen the first edition of Timcast Discord News? You're the main story. It's pretty hilarious. Yes, somebody did send that to me, and I didn't find it fun.
Yeah, I think it's amazing.
I didn't find
our-
that funny.
I won't say anything.
I didn't find
I
it funny. It,
wasn't there. I
it
definitely
continued to
didn't-
level the same insane
I
accusations
definitely
at me.
didn't hear him giggle when he saw it on Twitter today. That's definitely not Seamus' style.
Giggle?
A giggle.
Giggle? First of all, no noise that has ever come out of my face could be described as a giggle, Hannah Claire.
You could do
I
a
would have.
giggle.
I
it was
could
a
not
giggle.
do a giggle.
Giggler.
I've never done a
The thing
giggle in
is-
my life. Even when I laugh at something, it's a hearty manly.
What if it's
"Ha!"
what if it's a hard G
giggle.
like jiggle?
No, neither of those. I don't really think I jiggle all that much either. I don't have enough body fat.
I'm just here to report what I heard. I can't say it sounded like
Once
a giggle
again,
to
more
me.
fake news from the media, more fake news from the liberal press. Nate Pro says, "Hey Connor, glad to see you here.
Thank you.
Big fan of the Lotus Eaters, and as the most base person there, you're my favorite. Keep up the good
Whoa.
work
Whoa,
and
whoa,
spread
whoa.
truth, my guy." At the base person at the Lotus Eaters, he obviously thinks you're the most base person here, and he's wrong.
So,
'cause
so
I
that's
am.
funny because someone else today, a certain Roland Rat on Twitter, pseudonym of an academic named Nima Parvini, he said my colleague Harry was the most base person, and I did get my backup about that. So myself and the Northern Monkey himself will be dueling it out. I'm sure.
At your office, instead of having Employee of the Month, do you have like Based Person of the Month? I mean, how does this work?
So there is a Discord channel that used to exist called Josh's Based Takes, from which I will not read out because I will not incriminate my friend. But I think Josh might have had a monopoly on that for quite a while.
Oh wow,
Dude, how's Lotus Eaters going, by the way? Like, do you guys have any public plans coming up?
So we've just moved to new studios, so that's really cool. We've just unveiled that because beforehand, the bit behind the scenes, it was just one room and we had a curtain separating our filming stuff. So as soon as we were recording, the lights would go off and every writer was in the room had to be silent because it was all open plan office. Now we've got 2 new studios. One's a bit of a library, one's the 5-person roundtable. It's really cool. We might do a third one. We'll see what we cobbled together. And then future expansion plans. There might be some stuff in the works, but now we're just really glad that we get to record more concurrent content, more hosts, and I believe Stelios, Carl, and Bo did a discussion on the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was 4 hours the other day. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to do going forward.
Is this what you saw yourself deing when you went into debt for your university degree? What did you see yourself doing?
I wasn't really sure because I didn't really get into politics until my 2nd year. And what ended up happening was I was finding myself arguing with all of the other seminar participants that bothered to show up and the seminar leader when I thought I was stating observable truths. And we actually had, and I don't think I've told this story before, so okay, this should be fun.
Timcast exclusive.
Yeah. Well, I won't incriminate myself. We had invited, as part of a student society, we have like a Students for Liberty chapter, so very tepid, very free speech. We'd invited my current boss, Carl Benjamin, to speak, and Antifa, the Feminist Society, showed up in coordination with the student union who were elected at the time, and this was published in the student newspaper to, quote, bait them into being abusive to start fights to shut the society down. My then girlfriend had her work called to try and get her fired. They spray painted and defaced the side of the sports stadium. They made threats when we had an Israeli and Palestinian ambassador show up, the first UK university to do that. And then they decided to get into our group chat and fabricate screenshots of edgy jokes to make us look really bad.
Wow.
And so we got sat in front of a university tribunal, free speech tribunal, where genuinely the diversity inclusion coordinator had brought up quotes from Der Stormer saying, "Oh, the Nazis use humor to recruit their members, so that's what you guys have been doing." And the person that was chairing that particular tribunal was one of the student union members that had tried to start the fight on campus. So conflict of interest, completely overblown. We got chewed out for it. So then after that, my friend decided to set up a little think tank thing trying to tell the UK government that they were spending too much money on environmental policy. I joined that. I wrote a little bit on the side, and then I abandoned the government thing because they barely listened to me. They listened once and then not the rest of it. Frustrating. And then just sort of went into commentary and TV and whatnot accidentally. So yeah, long story short, no, didn't think I'd be here. Bit surreal, actually.
How'd you meet Carl?
So other than him coming to the university campus, I went to university with Callum. And so Kellen and I have known each other for a few years. But I went to a Lotus live event, and Carl had like a bit of an adverse first impression of me, but I started telling stories and he was like, "Oh, you're all right, actually. You're not much of a knob as I thought." And then so I got invited as a guest just to do a sort of guest podcast. It was meant to be with a former employee, but he wasn't showing up for the day. So I ended up doing one with Callum. And then Carl just went to me, "Oh, do you want to come and get a cup of tea, have a chat?" And I was like, "Yeah, thanks for bringing me in." He went, "So when do you start?" So that was really cool.
Nice.
Yeah, they didn't even have to interview for it, and I'm very thankful.
What did you say? You're like, I start next week, or?
I was like, well, I need to figure out how to get here / how to move here, and you know, but yeah, no, I'm very enthusiastic. And the lovely thing about Lotus is that we have actually built a parallel institution where all of us are good friends. Like some of those guys, and I don't want to sound soft, but some of those guys are like my brothers, and they've gotten. I've had a hit and miss year. Professionally great, personally a bit rough, and they've been there for me. So I'm
That's
very
very
thankful
cool.
to Carl and all those guys for putting that together.
That's great,
awesome.
man. No, it's good that he's building something over there, right? He decided to move outside of just having a brand based on his personality and started welcoming other people into
Well,
that.
he's got
It's
4
super
kids, you
important.
know. He's a busy guy.
Yeah. From CTI 29, this one's actually really heartbreaking. Someone I know's 17-year-old daughter got an abortion today at 13 weeks. I'm just asking for prayers for the family. I can tell it hurt them, and it seemed like they thought there was no other option. And so in a lot of these situations, a person feels like there's no other option, and that's why they do it. But there is always another option. There is always hope. There is always a way for that child to live.
Yeah.
And thrive.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Amen.
this is one of the things that we should be most irritated and most infuriated about modern culture, which is you'll get articles from Teen Vogue that say, this is how you comfort your friend after she gets an abortion. It's obviously targeted to young women in their 20s, probably even younger. It's Teen Vogue. And they act like there are no consequences to this decision. Ultimately, you're going to be happy you did it because your life is messed up by the results of decisions you made.
Exactly.
And I think that is just horrific, right?
It's fear-mongering, too, for all the time they spend accusing the right of fear-mongering. The left fear-mongers about human life. If we have too many people in the world, it's going to be horrible. Everyone's going to starve. If you have that child, you'll never achieve your dreams. Your life will be horrible. And then they accuse us of being emotionally manipulative for wanting to show people ultrasounds, which literally just show you a picture of what the child whose life you're contemplating ending looks like. You tell me what's more manipulative.
But that's
telling
how
someone they're
we-
never going to be happy if they have this child, or showing them the child.
That's how weak this argument is, though. One, the image of one sonogram could change everything for someone. That's why you can't see that there's actual life that you're terminating through an abortion. You're supposed to be completely separated from it. You're supposed to think of it like getting a haircut, maybe, or just
Going to the dentist,
something innocuous, which is completely misleading, right? You should be fully informed about the decisions you make. Of course, a young person, a 17-year-old, can't fully understand the consequences of all of their actions. On the other hand, we can't act like abortion is an emotionless, run-of-the-mill thing.
Yeah, so let's all say some prayers for that family. We
Healing
have
your body.
Yeah, we have from Matthew Hammond. Connor made it on Timcast IRL before Carl Benjamin. Look at that.
Yes, well, it coincided with a
scared of us?
with a general trip from mine, and thank you to Serge for saying, oh, you know, this guy might not be terrible. No, Carl is just genuinely so busy. Like I did say to him, oh, do you want to come join our trips and come do stuff? Because you know, we had potential other plans and other shows that were asking, and he just couldn't make it out this time because it was too short notice. He's just had his 4th child. She's less than 6 months old. So he's building an empire both at Lotus Caesars and at home, and so hopefully he will be able to come over either later in the year or early next year, and you guys will get the preferred candidate. So that's fine.
The full Monty.
I felt like this was great. I wouldn't swap you for
yeah.
him.
Yeah, I wouldn't swap
the
you at
tip of
all.
the spear.
We have from No Soup for Knowles, came for Tim, ... Who the EFF is this guy? So For those of you who don't know, No Soup for Knowles is an unbelievably terrible woman who does the voices for the female characters in Freedom Tunes. Just, I'd fire her instantly if I had any other option, but unfortunately,
It's not like you run a
women
company.
refuse to talk to you when you're a cartoonist. So yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, but she likes doing the cartoons. She treats me very poorly. It's really horrible.
No soup for Knowles.
Yeah, No Soup for Knowles.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I
Thanks
love
for
that you're going to
chatting in.
dodge this
Right.
question.
Great relationship.
Who is this guy? You're like just attacking the person who raised the question.
We have from Joe Mallet, Ian, Jiu-Jitsu. Do it. Started at 30 and wish I had sooner. Heading to my class now.
I'm very open to that. Phil Labonte, does jujitsu a little bit. I won't, not, a little bit, but he's actually been having, I think he said he had a knee injury from it a few months ago, which is a pain in the ass. So, one step at a time, but I'd have to cut my hair, I think. I'm not comfortable going in there and grappling with long hair.
No,
You should
women
wear
braid
like a
their
bathing
hair.
cap,
Yeah.
dude. No, wear like one of those bathing caps. You can be
Oh,
like corn
skin-
pop in there, bro.
Yeah.
You're like
Skin
"Hey,
tone,
Esther."
yeah, skin tone bathing cap, maybe.
Well, Clay Guida's was a great grappler, and he's always had really long, like wild caveman hair. It's just part of the aesthetic.
Wild, okay.
So
when I
good
roll
luck.
back on my back, I don't like it pulling, so I'd have to get it up and bound somehow.
We just got to teach you to French braid your own hair. I'm telling you. Have you not seen women's UFC? That's the key.
All right, I'm into it.
You just got to do it. You got to braid your hair, Ian.
Did it.
They'll lose their minds. They'll accuse you of like cultural appropriation or something like that.
Every minute of that.
Oh my goodness. We have here from Agamemnon's Gym Bag. It's a great name. I bet North FC loves Trump. Good to see you, Connor. One of the best on the Lotus eaters.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, he actually super chatted in quite a while ago, plugging one of my segments to Tim, which was appreciated. Yeah, are you guys familiar with what North FC
No.
is? Okay, so like Soy Jacks, the like open mouth glasses guy that's pointing. It's like kind of that art style. I don't know if you'll be able to pull up a photo of it, Serge, but it's like a big podgy man, poorly, crudely drawn, and he'll say very basic things that like anyone with sense would agree with. It's like the theologian and the.
I think I've seen this meme. Yeah.
And he'll just be like, "Love me country, love me wife, love me Greggs, hate the globalists, simple as." And it's
Simple
like
as,
the
that's right,
trustworthy British pub man that you'll find anywhere that is the heart of the country. Yeah, he does enjoy Trump. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
We're-
it. That's
we're pulling
Baz.
the meme
There
up,
he
yeah.
is.
What's his name again?
Baz, B-A-Z. It's North FC.
North
That's-
FC.
That's the gentleman in question.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a solid meme. I've seen it. I've seen it a number of times. I assumed it was.
Looks like a Mike Judge character.
It actually does look a bit like a Mike Judge character. It actually does.
That's
But
a
he's
good
got a
one.
very trustworthy face. That's
North
the point.
I would say so. I think I'd trust the guy.
He's seen things.
Is he gonna make an appearance in Freedom Tunes?
I can't just plagiarize somebody else's character.
That's
Hannah
true.
Claire.
I mean, you can.
Except for Joe Biden. He's one of the only funny SNL characters to ever have been created. He's just, I refuse to believe he's real. We have from Saddle Effing Trump. I'm sorry. I have to commend Seamus as a potato American Catholic being so civil with a British Protestant.
I'm not a
British Protestant. That's insulting.
I know,
I'm the British
That was
Protestant,
hurtful.
just so everyone knows.
Oh.
Yeah, you're Canadian.
I'm British Canadian,
And that's why
I
I'm never
was
civil
born in
with
America.
HC.
Yeah, my you'll be hearing from my priest. No, I'm
My bishop.
I am actually an Irish Catholic. Half of my family from Donegal. If my mum / nan hadn't have been married, my name would either be Connor James McDade or Connor James Daly.
And he's Irish on his mom's side, which means he's actually Irish.
Yeah,
That's how
exactly.
it works,
Yeah.
Were you born in Ireland?
No. My nan was, and she had the accent until she moved over. So
nice.
yeah, all good.
So are you your company's diversity hire then?
Yeah, technically the Irish aren't white, so it's me and Callum are black.
That's what I've heard.
Josh is quite swarthy. Stelios is Greek, so he's technically black. I guess
Here's the thing. In the U.S., the Irish are
Color,
considered
personal
white, but
color.
the Irish were only considered white once being white meant you had to apologize for being white. So we really got in.
got in at the worst
we got in
time.
at the worst possible time to get on being white. Excuse me. Red Rummix says, M in UK, medical job, had training today on how to write gender-neutral reports so we cannot say she or he. we are not allowed to use any pronouns at all. Madness. That is madness.
Because that's going to be a great way to communicate.
Yeah.
That's going to be super clear.
That's anecdotal, but that's concerning if that's true. 'Cause that's
That is
medical.
how the NHS management staff are run. The diversity inclusion coordinators over there go for 70 to 80,000 pounds salaried a year. The NHS, by the way, just to dispel like any romanticism about universal healthcare and how it normally plays out to an American audience. We have an exponential increasing budget that can never meet demand, and the amount that we spend on bureaucracy is hellish, and so there's this trickle up effect. And like they spent like thousands of pounds painting rainbow crosswalks outside of the hospitals every year.
Well, it
Well,
saves
the whole
lives.
point,
It saved
it
lives.
saves lives, exactly. How do they know they're gonna be safe at that hospital? The rainbow sidewalks, I'm convinced they're only there so that the lefties can have their persecution complex validated every single time there's a skid mark on it. Like, why would you put your sacred symbolism on a street?
Oh,
Also,
yeah.
how can you be that minority group if we're painting your group symbol on something
know.
like this? Doesn't make sense.
It literally makes no sense. It literally makes
It makes no
absolutely no
sense.
sense.
That's what I find so exhausting, is trying to like grapple with the logic or therefore lack of logic from the other side, because I do feel obligated to sort of consider where someone would be coming from. But at a certain point, you have to just say, like, you don't make sense, right?
Yeah.
It's not because I mean, it's just that you don't make any
exactly.
sense.
Exactly. Esse Federale says, Connor, England has nothing in regards to aristocrats. They wrote an entire joke called The Aristocrats about the Biden family. What are your thoughts?
England does still have somewhat of an aristocracy. It's just that they don't really consider our concerns anymore. This is kind of the I'm going to upset your show. This is kind of the great lie of democracy. It's that it doesn't really matter whether or not every mechanism is based on consent. It matters whether or not the sort of landowning gentry are substantively, they see you as part of their moral constituency.
Yeah.
Like the American aristocracy, yeah, sure, they're elected, sort of. I mean, the gerrymandering and all that. But they consider the people they rule over less than a feudal lord would have consideration for his peasants. And we still have an aristocracy to an extent. I mean, the House of Lords is still appointed as peerages by the Prime Minister, and they're very rich people in that, and they get final say on legislation and whatnot. It's just that a lot of the aristocracy are captured by progressive ideals, so they don't even have the old class dynamic anymore.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting, and there's definitely something to that. One thing I love, which Hans Hermann Hoppe said, is that part of what democracy does is it eliminates class consciousness, right? So people who are lower on the authority hierarchy don't really see themselves as separate from their leaders because they've gotten to choose them. But, like, make no mistake, you are in separate classes. You are absolutely in separate classes, and I agree with you that not every mechanism, like the idea that every mechanism within government being based on consent is what makes it functional is absolutely nonsensical. Obviously, there are certain people who are unappointed bureaucrats, and I have issue with that if you're in a nation which prides itself on being democratic. But ultimately, what's important is that we have laws that help a man reach his final end, which help a man to live virtuously, have a good life, be able to provide for his family, the things that actually matter to people. And so I'm there with you. Think on This says, as a former university employee, I say raid the university endowments to pay off student loans. Who do you think benefited from lying to people about the positives of, 1, higher education, and 2, taking out loans? Okay, so here's where I'm going to disagree with you on this. For as much as I am sympathetic to making the colleges pay for this, if you raid that, what you're essentially doing is taking the money that people who have already paid off their debt financed and then giving it to people who haven't paid off their debts. If you're going to redistribute the endowments, if you're going to redistribute the money that these universities got, it actually makes more sense to redistribute that money to college-educated people who already paid off their loans.
Is there any university in America that, because a lot of endowments are generated through fundraising, through alumni, are there any colleges in America that say to their alumni, hey, you could donate directly to someone's student loan debt?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Instead of scholarships, why don't we just say, like, you could give me $10,000 and we will actually give it to a kid who's in $10,000 worth of student loan debt?
Sponsorships, essentially.
Right. Yeah. I don't understand why it's always, I understand the point of scholarships, and I understand, although I don't always agree with why universities fundraise, but if we wanted to have a forgiveness program, wouldn't it be interesting to have, the alumni of a school say, this student has taken out loans, they seem to be performing well academically, I want to pay off their loan.
And the schools
Why
that
are we
get-
having this third party?
The ones that have
bureaucracy?
more repayments through that kind of process would have more people applying to them.
And there would be an expectation that when you became, if you were an alumni in a position where it was financially viable, you would then contribute in a similar way. And that system would be really cool. But
Yeah.
instead we're like,
Well-
no, give your money to the college to then,
I think that's
I don't know, waste.
That's a great idea. That's a
Thank
really
you.
good idea.
And then that's the thing, even though, as I mentioned, a person ends up making more as a result of having a college education, I still think degrees are massively overpriced. And so the fact that you'd pay more for something than you should have, and then they would ask you for more money is totally wild. Just the audacity. C.S. Cooper says, Connor, so awesome
Oh,
to
yep,
see
you're right,
you
Craig.
stateside. When can we expect Lotus Eaters USA division? P.S. Tell Callum I said ... know what
So
that
CS Cooper, we have video comments for any of our paying members. So if they pay us the gold tier, which is just £30 a month, they can send in a video comment at the end of our podcast and interact with us. And Craig, who pays his monthly subscription, uses it very kindly to promote his books. We're building culture, I suppose. But yeah, Lotus Eaters USA division, we do not quite have the budget to expand to that at this point. Though, if we are chased out the country, I mean, we might just become de facto Lotus Eaters USA division. So, who knows?
Well, just come join us in West Virginia. That'd be fun.
Don't tempt me.
Excuse me, unbelievable. Alan Schur says, clearly YouTube is holding Freedom Tunes accountable for underhouse dwelling people stealing spoons. So this is exactly the problem
Yeah, it
with
feels like
spreading
karma.
misinformation.
Yeah.
This is exactly the problem with
I knew
spreading misinformation on the internet.
Not even a question.
There's no evidence I ever stole spoons.
But there's karmic justice.
There's no evidence that I live. There is not. And there's also no evidence that I live under Tim's house and steal his spoons. This is ridiculous. But I think there's actually credibility to this theory that I'm being falsely punished for crimes that I did not commit because Tim Pool, this is, you know what, I'm going to have to talk to the Daily Beast about this one.
Last week, I saw Seamus emerge from the basement. Actually, I didn't see you emerge.
It's
I just saw
actually
you
more
emerge
fake news.
from where the
It's-
basement is, from that area. And then I saw you walk over to a berry bush and just pick some berries and then eat them.
That actually did happen.
And then he walked back.
Hold on. How did I eat them?
One hand, one finger at a time. I wasn't
So
sure.
Interesting. So no spoon was used
not
when I
at the
ate
time.
the berries.
I can't verify.
Interesting.
Do you think suffering through these allegations will make you stronger? In the
I think it
end?
will make me stronger as a person, yeah, and that should scare all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think you actually benefit from this misinformation? It's a trial that you are therefore benefiting from?
I think things that happen to you are all things that you can benefit from, ultimately.
Forging
but that
steel with
doesn't mean
fire.
it's not an injustice. And
So-
it is an injustice.
Should we release a formal spoon count of how many spoons are available on property and what that compares to? I mean, I didn't never.
Now you want a
counted before.
nanny state to go around and count every
I just
spoon
feel like
on
we
the
have to do an
property? This is ridiculous.
We have to do an in-depth study,
This
right?
is ridiculous.
For all we know,
Or
you
I'm
melted the
being-
spoons down.
These paranoid
Or there are more
conspiracies.
spoons,
They
right?
call me
Maybe
spooning
he
on,
bought
and he's saying this
spoons and he
nonsense.
Check the
brought them.
receipts.
This is garbage. This is nonsense.
It's just been going on for too long.
I'm just saying,
can't-
we can't say if the spoons are missing if we don't know how many spoons we have.
And Tim won't even come back. He's so angry. I'm joking, by the
Tim-
way, you guys. Jeez, everyone was quiet. No, he left because he's stealing his stuff. He's
He's not mad at
he
you,
needed
Ian.
space.
He's not mad at you.
I don't blame him.
He just needed to take a break, go to the farm, hang out. You know, he'll come back.
Tim will be back next week. Everyone's
will.
like,
We'll see if I
Tim,
let. We'll
he's the only
see
reason
if-
this show's good.
It depends if I allow Tim to come back, he'll be back. But we're gonna have to see about that. Stefan Veda. What is wrong with me? Unbelievable. Interesting number. Ukraine uses 5,000 artillery shells per day. U.S. makes 80,000 per year. Russia is estimated to make 700,000 to 3.3 million per year. And Biden says we're low on ammunition. This isn't good.
I got to hear those numbers again.
Ukraine uses I feel like I'm reading a word problem almost now. Ukraine. I'm like
Ukraine uses
I'm there with you.
5,000.
I'm with you, dude. As soon as I read something, I'm like, what were the numbers? Ukraine uses 5,000 artillery shells per day. The U.S. makes 80,000 per year. Russia is estimated to make 700,000 to 3.3 million per year. And Biden says we're low on ammunition. This isn't good.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yes, I agree. Joe Biden talking is not good. I've never been a fan.
I know we haven't touched on Ukraine at all, and I'm no foreign policy expert, but my position on it is I'm a little Englander and I don't want to pay for either country. That's just it. I mean, radical take, I suppose, but
Just completely illogical. How could you do this, people of Ukraine?
That's like calling somebody. It's weird. We have this term isolationist. Like it's antisocial to not want to go to war with other people. It's like, what? I'm not saying we can't trade with other people or be friends with other people. I'm saying don't go to war with them. What? What's more isolating? Being at peace with other countries or going to war with them? You tell me. Blanks, BLENCZ, says yes with an exclamation point. So that's yes. My two favorite Catholic political commentators are on the same show. Question for Connor. What has been your favorite and least favorite part about visiting the States? Also, when is the next Comics Corner happening?
Okay, so Comics Corner's coming out, I think tomorrow might be. Depends on if our wonderful editor Jack has been doing double time since I've been away. It's on the history of comics, part 1. We're gonna have another Berserk one coming out soon as well. It's very inside baseball, guys. Basically, Carl pays us to talk about comics once a month. I love my job. So visiting the States. I feel like a smurf because everything is massive here. Like, why do you have 4-lane roads? That would be a highway where I'm from. This is ridiculous. But I can tell that if the revival is going to come from somewhere, it is definitely going to come from here first. And because you guys still have a deep sense of social texture, even in deep blue Massachusetts, there was a 2-to-1 ratio of national flags to pride flags. There is still latent Christianity here. I mean, I'll paraphrase Nietzsche, who I don't like, but he was right in that if God is considered dead culturally, then the great cathedrals of Europe will become the sepulchres and mausoleums to a dead idea. And that is largely what has unfortunately happened with both the hollowing out of the congregations in the UK and also like the Archbishop of York coming out and saying the Lord's Prayer is patriarchal and oppressive.
It is patriarchal, yes.
Yes, that's why I like
But
it.
that's our
Absolutely,
whole
yes.
thing.
The I got news for you. The universe is a patriarchy. We have a king. Like, that's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Well, that's one way to look at it.
No, get out. Ian, your band.
The unimorph.
Get out.
Universe,
If you-
unimorph.
if you
universe
want-
is amorphous mass. I'm
If
just
you
saying.
want the worldview that posits that I'm some kind of lunatic spoon thief, then you go with whatever.
We'll go into it on the after show.
I think the comment on the highway is the best one. If you've ever driven in England, Americans can't do it, especially if you're in more rural areas trying to go down any road. You'll see these cars speed towards each other and just narrowly skate one another.
Yep.
It's terrifying.
That is the only thing that I have experienced. I've had friends who have tried to encourage me to move out here, and this is the Peter Hitchens position, being Denethor, you know, flee for your lives, England is lost. And it's not that I'm not sympathetic, and I have come to love this country quite a bit, but I just feel like I would be alien were I tried to call anywhere else home. So for a little while, I'll stay and fight until I'm pushed out.
Are the roads in England, are they just old? Is that why they're smaller and they don't handle cars very
Yes,
well?
we're not a super industrial town. Not town, country.
country.
Like
Yeah.
you don't get like Ford F-150 pickup trucks.
Nope.
It's just completely smaller scale.
or freedom or toothbrushes or anything like that. It's just like a difficult country. to live
Our
in.
teeth are fine, actually.
I know it's like the number one
You're
stereotype. though.
skating on
I had
hate
to make
crimes
cheap-
right now,
No,
I will
know.
tell you.
Listen, I'll tell you this much. I gotta be honest with you, man. When you're talking about the U.S. maybe having a resurgence or being the country that brings this stuff back, I hope you're right, but it sounds like it's really bad in Europe. If you can be
yeah,
in a
certainly.
blue state and say, well, you know, things are pretty good here, that's
We
that's
don't
frightening.
fly our national flag. So actually, so this is what most people don't understand. The Union Jack, there are very few of them, but each country has its own national flag, and the Scottish and Welsh and that, they're Celtic nationalists, so they'll fly theirs. England don't fly their national flag. And actually, I think she was Shadow Foreign Secretary. She might now be the chief lawyer of the Labour Party, which is going to be the incumbent government. Emily Thornberry, grotesque woman. She decided to tweet out a while ago a photo of a council flat with a white van and the English flag hanging outside the window because it was the World Cup or something. And I don't know if she explicitly captioned it disgusting, but I remember that being the vibe. And it's the utter contempt that the political establishment have for patriotism in our country. It's near inescapable.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a huge part of that is if you're actually patriotic to your country and you don't blindly obey your political leaders, that's a problem for them. Actually having, you know, faith and concern and loyalty for and towards the values of your nation rather than whatever political leader happens to be in power or whatever movement is fashionable is absolutely a no-no. You have to eliminate
I understand though
patriotism.
the dislike of nationalism sometimes because like we could have a global system of decentralized statehood. Like we could just be a United States of Earth
No,
where
thank
everyone
you.
governs themselves locally and then we're all connected through like, you know, laws and internet but like decentralized, it could be more decentralized. Like we don't have to stop here at nationalism.
But
So
tech is a homogenizing force. That's the point. It always has the ratchet effect to greater global surveillance, cultural ubiquity, because it's easier to itemize, and that's why it stratifies people into satiating their individual desires rather than having local, parochial, geographically bound values. So I am very skeptical of sort of the possibility of international cooperation to keep together any sort of cultural texture.
Yeah, especially at that scale. Well, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank
Blimey,
you
that was
all for
fast.
stopping
Thank you
by.
very
And also, everyone watching, if you enjoyed the show, smash that like button, share the video. And Connor, where can we find you?
Well, you can find most of my work over at lotuseaters.com. You can find me on Twitter at @con_Tomlinson, where I'll tweet out my articles for The Critic and my clips from GB News and whatnot. And please go and support all of my colleagues' work. Even if you don't like me, the Lotus Eaters is a big cast, so there might be something for you over on the website.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you were here. This is a great conversation. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. You should go there, click on the read tab, and see all the work from me, from Chris Bertman, from all of our other journalists. Follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. It's the bet. I can't tell if you're gesturing at me. No. Okay. You can follow me personally on Instagram and at hannahclaire.b and on Twitter at HCBrimlow. Thank you so much.
Yes, that was lively. I loved it. Thank you, Connor. That was
pleasure,
awesome, man.
Ian.
Good to meet you, dude.
Yeah.
You guys follow me on the internet at Ian Crossland. This is the name right behind me here, and IANCROSSLAND. I used to think it was where my ancestors crossed the land. Then I was told, like, no, that's where these crucified people. I'm like, oh damn, is that real?
Are you about to
out.
become a fitness influencer?
Yeah.
That's
So what
I
I'm
really
saying
wanna
is,
know.
my
Ian
trainer
CrossFit.
Brandon took video of me today working out. I have before pictures, so I'm going to be posting my journey videos on, I don't know, Twitter. I think I'll focus them on Twitter. I might put them up on Instagram as well, mines as well. So follow me on all those platforms, and I'll be seeing you guys.
Yeah, again, thank you all for watching. I'm Seamus Coughlin. I have, I'm so sorry, Serge, my man.
It's cool, man.
I didn't mean to.
I'll just do the
Listen,
show.
no,
It's fine.
Serge.
I was
Don't worry about
stretching.
it.
It's
Serge.
Shipcast, I guess.
I
Yeah,
love you, and I'm sorry.
It's all good, dude. Thanks for joining us, Connor. I really wanted to have this to happen. I reached out to Cassandra, who does the booking. It's not me. Stop asking me. I don't do anything for the booking.
Except in this case, then he intervenes.
Yes, I intervened because you hit me. Yeah, he hit me up on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, if you're in town, I'm sure I can get you on the show. Here we are. Tim's not here, but I can only do so much. Not a miracle worker. Yeah, take it away, Seamus.
Yeah, so my name's Seamus Coughlin. I have a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes that I used to be able to get into. We're hoping that's going to be able to get sorted out. I'm optimistic it will, because it's clear we clearly didn't violate TOS. I think they're going to see it and realize it was a mistake. But just in case something horrible happens, or in case something like this happens in the future, we have a website. It's called freedomtunes.com. Please go over there. All of our videos are there. Bookmark that page if you're a fan of me, because even in this situation where I think there was a mistake, well, I'm not able to get in and upload videos. So go over to freedomtunes.com, bookmark it. And if you want to support what we're doing, please become a member. You'll get an extra cartoon every week that we don't put on YouTube, and that is exclusive for members. We're also going to be starting to put behind the scenes content up there. Thank you all so much. Please go over to timcast.com and join us for the after show at about 10:10 tonight.